The ending to Sanjuro, I won't spoil it, is one of the simplest yet greatest like sort of punctuation marks to like an excellent like adventure. Just
Right.
it's inspired me narratively speaking, which is why I bring this up. In so many ways in the stories I tell is to sort of like end with like a good like a good punch, whether it's literary or like a good action scene, or even like just a good that sort of Kaiser Soze turning the leg and gradually walking like that. That is kind of like a punch to an end too. So but I can see Digital Keegan showing up. Whoop, Alex, why are you on here? LOL, you should be sleeping for days.
I'll get there. I'll get there. Good to see you, Keegan. Oh, I should actually shout this out to the Discord, shouldn't I? Whoops.
Um,
Because I totally up until I saw that tweet, like I was just thumbing through Twitter, and I'm like, oh yeah, we were doing that, weren't we?
yeah, I don't worry. I forgot which guest I had on this week versus next week, and I'm like I'll just wing it. I won't,
So kind of how we ran the last 2 months of the campaign. Gotcha.
is that yeah. Well, I mean, I haven't run like as robust a campaign in any Age of Sigmar capacity, but I have run a bunch of like tabletop RPG campaigns. I've GM'd for about 25 years. Um,
Cool.
and
So most of my lifetime. Got it.
yeah, there's a healthy dose of winging it in my GMing too.
Yeah. Well, and what's really come on Discord, cooperate with me. What's really satisfying about it is something that you know as the GM that you kind of just sort of winged.
Hmm.
Like seeing it take on a life of its own. So like there's a few just sort of like throwaway locations on the map that have become like these really important consequential things.
Hmm.
But when we first wrote them, it was just like, oh, this seems fun to stick here. Like that's a clever name. Let's do that. And then it sort of evolves.
Well, I mean that is the beauty of, and kind of jumping the gun here a bit during the cold open, but that is the that is the beauty of an organic storytelling sort of genre, like with a campaign or a neo environment, or a tabletop RPG campaign, is you're essentially, rather than getting on the stage and delivering a monologue to
Yeah.
folks, to the audience is actually on stage with you, dialoguing with you, and that's the beauty, is it's that two-way conversation during that story. And I think that's what really
Yeah.
makes something like this especially special. And your audience is insanely far reaching. So before we get into any of that, I see chat gangs here. W. Soren says good evening from Texas, and drops 1,000 RDP to remind everyone that chat gang ain't none to fuck with. Minimum Pants also dropping 1,000 RDP to remind you that chat gang ain't nothing to fuck with. So this is, of course, AOS RantCast 64. We're going to be talking about the Neo Plight Animosity campaigns with Alex. I will be your host this evening, the Magical Mr. Mephisto, if you forgot. How's it going, my friend?
It's going. I'm. It feels really good to be on the other side of it. I won't say I'm in the clear yet, or we're in the clear yet, but it feels really good. We started Animosity. We relaunched it from its Warhammer Fantasy incarnation last year. So it feels good to have already had one in the books, and then come back and do it again and do it even. I don't want to say better because this year is such a different experience
This
than last
year,
year,
yeah, yeah.
but certainly much bigger last year.
It's weird because like I've gone through a cycle of, at the beginning I wanted to just kind of put my head down and grind through COVID. I'm like, I don't need to talk about it on my show. Everyone's gonna make a show about it, and then like it gradually just became just a part of like a part of the zeitgeist so firmly that it's like you realize that it's sort of altered personal, professional, hobby lives just blank in a blanket across the board. So it's like, how do you not address that?
Absolutely.
Hey, this has added some complication. And what's unique about Animosity campaign is that you're essentially doing them sort of remotely. Like this is
Right.
yeah, and I guess real quick, do you want to, for people who may not know what the Animosity campaigns are, kind of give them the pitch of what it is, and before we kind of get into like the how and the minutia.
Sure, and just so people don't think that I'm ignoring you, I'm also doing hobby while we speak. But so yeah, animosity campaigns. For any people in the audience who've been around a really long time, actually first began out of on an internet forum for greenskins in 2004. It was called the Warpath. If any of you go back that far and were active then. And Animosity started in the aftermath of the Storm of Chaos worldwide campaign. And basically, there were a bunch of orc players who had a lot of fun. And they were like, hey, we want to keep having fun even though this campaign's over. So they started Animosity, which was named after the old orc rule of the same name. And it's come to mean a lot more than that. Uh, let's see if I can stick this ogre tyrant's foot on the right way. Nope. Um, but so Uh, Animosity then progressed through 10 years from 2004 to 2014 of Warhammer Fantasy campaigns, which were 100%. Like we were joking when we kicked this off a couple months ago. Uh, we were the original socially distanced campaign because the whole thing was forum based. So the basic, like reduced to lowest terms, Animosity in a normal year is basically you play games with your friends and then you go to our website animositycampaigns.com and you report those games, and that depending on how you allocate your reports, that influences how the story goes. So the narrative is 100% open ended. Like we set the stage and then it just it goes from there. We don't have like we have broad strokes of what can happen in the story, but we certainly don't railroad anything, and Animosity never has. But anyway, so that went on from 2004 to 2014, and then a few things happened all at once. And why is this tyrant not standing on the base level? Um, there we go. Maybe. Uh, as I'm sure you're all aware, end times happened.
Yeah.
Um, so the setting that Animosity existed in blew up, and then we had a site crash, so our own continuity blew up
That's I mean there's a that's like
at the
perfect.
same time.
I mean you're going too hard. This is method acting. Like you're going way too hard.
So just a huge amount of data loss. And a lot of people moved on, and it just sort of went into purgatory for a long time. And I ended up picking up the website domain because it had been like to demonstrate the kind of friendships that and experiences that we had as players back then. One of my fellow game masters, Peter, I was he invited me to be in his wedding party, so I was a groomsman. Now I was the groomsman like furthest from the best man, but I was still there.
I mean that's
Um,
still pretty impressive from like building those forging those like sort of online relationships and seeing them become real world. I think that's something special about the Warhammer community.
yeah,
You know, it felt like I mean I grew up in like the AIM chat room era of the internet, sort of
yeah,
old enough to like have an online girlfriend and stuff like that, right?
right.
Um, it seemed like it was such the rarity. I mean, I remember I had an AIM D&D game for crying out loud. It was horrible, but I did it. It's interesting because it felt like it was like such the rarity that anything would come from anything on the internet in that way, and yet we live in this combination of era and community where it's become far more ubiquitous, where you do take those relationships offline. Age of Sigmar for me is a great sort of mechanism for that. I meet you online, I see your models all the time, and I want to go to a tournament so I can hang out and in this sort of safe space where we have a mutual interest and develop those relationships further. And I think that's pretty magical. With a campaign like this, you have something that just a base tournament may not have, which is I've been talking about this a lot with Blood Bowl lately, the Blood Bowl league we started. on accident. um,
It happens. Yeah.
yeah. It seems there's something to this starting really big things on accident. But oh yeah, IRC client, all the works, right?
Yeah. Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
terrible.
yeah, I liked MSN Instant Messenger though because I got to change my screen name to song lyrics. Uh, sorry,
Right.
I derailed myself there by reading Chat Gang. No, but what I was saying is like I like that with a campaign, I feel like you have that sort of stakes. That's the thing I talk about in Blood Bowl is like there are stakes that you may, yeah, 2K tournament, I show up and I want to win the prize and or drink beer and see my friends I haven't seen in a long time. But with a campaign, like in a narrative sense, there's sort of like this progressing narrative. These stakes, right? If my character does something sweet, or my army does something sweet, that could become canon for Animosity 3 or 4,
Yeah,
right?
and as any of the I don't know if any of my players I invited everyone, but I don't know if anyone's here. Well, I know Keegan's here, but yeah, like that's very much how how we structure our experience. And I think I'm double checking here because I want to quote it right. Yeah, my pinned tweet on my personal Twitter account is match players fight battles, narrative players wage wars, and I think that was very evident in the last 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And we had just a really quick anecdote when you say about just everything you just said. We had one player, a Zangor by the name Quark Rustwater, and again, if there's any of our players in the chat, they're all screaming right now.
They're I think they're there.
Who he got it in his head that he wanted to try to kill one of the figureheads, and the figureheads are non-player characters that we write that each of the coalitions, which is our replacement for grand alliances, sort of coalesce around their figurehead. And Quark decided he wanted to try to kill a figurehead, one of the opposing figureheads, and things worked out in such a way that we gave him a shot. But it was we were like, we'll give you a chance, and then it was literally like your Anvil of Apotheosis war scroll versus one we generate, and we roll the dice. And my buddy Peter, like I don't think any of the players know this, so I'll admit to it on air. He came up with what he calls face down. So he each roll he enters it in the chat, like literally dice roll by dice roll, and narrates it like he's narrating a boxing match. So
Nice.
so that's our entertainment while our players are risking their lives. And yeah, so Quark Rustwater killed Arali Heartsbane, the pilgrimage's figurehead, which was a slaughter queen. Um, and so then that led to this really hilarious story that ended up in the final unfolding narrative, where a Fireslayer player who was shall we say close with Arali sent his rune son to go get revenge, and Quark killed him too. So
Unbelievable!
again, we had Anvil of Apotheosis scrolls running into each other.
That's amazing.
And then Quark and a buddy decided they decided they were going to kill their own figureheads. And Quark decapitated one in the first round of combat, and then got his head smashed in by the other and died. So,
Got a little too
that
big for his britches.
yeah, like I was reminded, in any casino movie where it's like, let them roll, and eventually, the luck runs out.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
but that's literally just one of hundreds of just little fun anecdotes where, at the same time, like this was his player character, and he decided to stake his character over and over again, and eventually he got killed. And we at no point do we ever decide to kill player characters. That's not something we do. It's not fair to the players. But if they're willing to stake their own characters on it, then it's like, yeah, if we'll let the dice decide it, and if you lose, well,
Yeah.
you're in the campaign canon. Your character's dead. Generate a new one.
Right, right. So real quick here, I want to catch up on some chat gang. First of all, Shadow Claimer, thank you so much for that tier 1 sub. It is September after all, so subs are I think they're half off or something like that. So thank you so much for that. Appreciate you supporting the stream here. Caleb saying Kane says you get to attach yourself to the outcome of stuff. Ricky Smith sounding off saying here. Kaleonis in there talking about some of the chat programs from back in the day. I, Sir Bald de Flax, am here. uh, people. Oh boy, did people get attached. Hey Nuno, how's it going, my friend? Um, like a Shadow Claimer says, like a brave circus performer, everything revolves around the cannon.
Yes.
uh, well,
When you put it that way.
the Stormcast seemed detached, at least when they murdered those turnip orphans. Oof.
Yeah,
Um,
that happened too.
they ro-
Unfortunately,
they robbed us of it. That's a little murder hobo-y, isn't it?
so some would say it's normal for Stormcast, but
Wait till he learns of the wretched figureheads.
mm,
Knights Excelsior were in character. You folks ain't. Okay, you ain't gonna let it down, are you? I'm gonna go ahead and guess that Nuno did some bad stuff.
well, no, he didn't because he was on the GM team, but no, the players certainly did some bad stuff to each other, and that's a design feature, not a bug.
Yeah, yeah, feature not
but
a bug. Kickers.
again, it comes back to, if you don't mind me saying, it comes back to what you're saying, where like you go to a tournament, you roll dice, you have fun, you're competing for to get as high up the scoreboard as you can. But at the end of the day, you go home and you redesign your list, and I mean, let's just say passions have flared over this, and there's definitely been
Well, there's I mean there is a joy in tinkering and always refining the solving the puzzle from a mechanic standpoint and stuff like that. Like I'm one of those rare individuals who can really like kind of wear multiple hats and shift gears. Like I enjoy. I mean, I've covered on an episode with Chuck Moore. Like, I don't go to like a match tournament without an understanding of like even the narrative of my army. Um,
yeah.
More recently, I got a draw from Pack because it's the last physical tournament I played at back in January, playing against David Wydek from Garage Hammer.
Mm.
We had this like story essentially of Reikener trying to like kind of take down Nagash in a rebellion because he didn't like how Nagash was like sort of co-opting Olander and all this
Fair
stuff.
enough.
And so we just had this like I think you can inject narrative into your games, and I think
Yeah.
you should even in a match play sense find it can be minor stuff like this is Throck General Slayer, my my mega boss, and all he wants to do is find the biggest baddest monster and kill it, and then just so like every game I play at a match play tournament, I'm always throwing this mega boss on foot into like the general of the army and just seeing how many I can kill in 5 rounds, right? Like there's other ways to like sort of infuse your own narrative. But when there's a collective narrative all working together and against each other too, right? You've got that sort
Yeah.
of like your butting heads. You've got your passions because you're once you have a character, you have an anchor point. Like
Yeah.
this
Absolutely.
this very fixed point that you're observing everything, and whereas playing match play is an awful lot like an RTS. You're sort of
Yeah.
you're the disembodied hand floating around the table clicking on
That,
stuff in a
that's a
like.
good way to look at it. Yeah.
But once you're
I
playing
get
that
that.
more narrative game, it's a lot more like a Suikoden or like like a more of a personal RPG where you're not just the disembodied hand floating around clicking the units anymore. You're actually one of the players standing there yelling out orders and directing the battlefield.
Yeah. No, I'd absolutely agree with that.
Narrative PvP. Good way of putting it, Kalionis.
Yeah.
Um, Emerald Canticle was an absolute joy. See, now it's just like a bunch of. You can tell there's like a lot of passion going on in here. I'll kick her real quick before I let this one
Yeah.
get buried. Said
Yeah. I
said
got time. Have at it.
said long live the pilgrimage, and huge thanks for all the work on Animosity too. Name your characters so you care if they die.
Yeah. Basically.
Right, right. I 100% never cared about my Blight Kings until they were named. Well, I mean that's going on in Blood Bowl right now. Is I've named all my players like really bad like football, mostly Packers puns, and I don't want Scaron Rogers to die now. Whereas when they were unnamed, it's like whatever. If he dies, he dies, right?
I get that reference.
Long live the pilgrimage. Tell that to your dead figurehead, buddy. Look at the shade. Look at this trash talk.
That's another. We literally when we started the Discord, we were like, well, we want to give players a place to collaborate and have sort of a sense of community, but we didn't really know. We had no idea what the turnout was going to be or like what shape it would end up taking. And what one of the shapes it ended up taking was that there was trash talk in the community channel. So I brought back something from the old forum days called the pit. I was like, all right, take your trash talk to the pit. And so then in the pit, everyone started posting food. So it became the barbecue pit, and I had to make another channel for trash talk, which then didn't get used because all the trash talk ended up in the diplomacy channels they asked for, and it definitely took on a life of its own.
See, there's a beauty in that, and I have to wonder how many tabletop RPGs or like D&D riffs, Vampire the Masquerade type campaigns have you been in or run? Because I'm seeing some parallels between like some of the tenets I have for my tabletop RPGs and the Animosity campaigns.
Nothing. I actually have very little RPG experience.
Weird, because like you're coming off like a pro right now. I'm like, this would make a
Uh,
really good GM.
Thanks. No, I again, my buddy Peter, he's been playing RPGs since he was knee high to a grasshopper. But no, for me, I've only played in a couple, honestly.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Trash talk is a form of diplomacy. Says Shadow Claimer. 46 weeks. That's time to develop an army and a story. There you go, Mars. um, so you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier on that this was this is the original socially distanced uh, campaign or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but we also did mention that there were some new challenges for COVID because obviously a portion of this is you play with your friends and then you sort of like where you can locally and then you kind of submit those to the interwebs and you develop the story as you go. What were some challenges in sort of getting these stories at that sort of grassroots level and then pulling them into the greater campaign with the landscape these days?
So ironically, we all we really had to do was go back to our roots as a forum based event. Excuse me. So what happened last year was I'd seen Coalescence, what, 17 and 18. I'd played in those, and I'd played in some other narrative events with Aaron Bostian, and I'd seen things like Realms at War, Holy Hammer, etc. So like I'd kind of gotten a feel for like what narrative events looked like in the Age of Sigmar community,
Mm-hmm.
and I built as Keegan and Caleb can attest to in the chat. I built last year's event to very much be a in person experience. So basically, the way I set it up was that narrative event organizers would take our setting and sort of our event pack and everything, and they would bring that to their local players. But like the narrative event organizer was the point of contact between their players and us.
Mm-hmm.
So they took what their players were doing and they relayed that back to us, and then we created the what we called the unfolding narrative out of what they reported back to us.
Mm-hmm.
This year, that wouldn't really work, and I mean it worked for Keegan, but for most of us that won't work. Um, so we went back to our roots, where every player submits their own reports, and you can submit more than just games, which we did allow last year, but only a couple of people actually went that route. So we ended up dividing it into 5 report categories, and we allowed players to submit 1 report per category. And Our categories were gaming, which covered your normal tabletop games, but also covered single player Warcry. Like Doug Griggs, Two Plus Stuff, has a single player Warcry thing. Nuno came up with single player Age of Sigmar with apparently a
Amazing.
a really hard AI. I haven't played it, but apparently it's very difficult. Um, we allowed that, and we allowed tabletop simulator, and tabletop simulator actually took off in a big way after like the first week, and I've never really used it, but we had one player, Ashavolk, who was creating, like, every week he was creating new custom tables for like that week's narrative for tabletop simulator.
Mhm.
And those are things, if anyone in chat plays tabletop simulator, like all those assets are still out there if you want to play on some really cool looking tables in
Right.
tabletop simulator.
Right on. Real quick, not to cut you off, but
No, absolutely.
Tectonic Craft Studios here says food pics are the universal language. I agree.
Yep.
Um, I don't get the snobbery with hating on people taking pictures of food. um, Nuno says Alex has an instinctive understanding of RPGs somehow, both as a GM and a player. Started playing Soulbound and hit the ground running. Yeah, see now I'm curious like where this like sort of instinctual um, sensibilities as a GM is just coming because you're talking to me and you're like speaking my language in terms of like
Fair.
tenets of RPG and stuff like that. Real wow, Shadow Claimer gifting 10 tier 1 subs to the community here. Digital Keegan, Nuno, Ricky Smith, Tectonic Studios, Harry Licious, Wolflord, Zum, Fake Plastic Tea, which it might be the greatest Radiohead pun ever. Texas Wargamer and CBD 88. So enjoy those emotes. Most important of which is of course our chat gang emote. So thank you so much for that. And then the gosh would be the second most important one. um, yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned like having 5 categories. Just to
Yeah.
reset here real quick. 5 categories. This is where most of my Twitter feed lit up with like animosity, like sort of painting or hobby submissions.
Yeah,
Um,
we had a hashtag which was hashtag animosity 2, and that's Roman numeral 2, so 2 eyes, not the number 2.
mhm.
So if I mean, anyone's welcome to thumb back through that because there's a lot there. But yeah, so that was where, so I just wanted to run through like what gaming itself looked like.
Right, right, right.
But yeah, our other categories were painting and modeling, storytelling, which was literally stage a photo of your models fighting each other if that's all you want to do. And some people did some really creative stuff. We had arts and crafts, which we got a lot of illustrations and some other really neat stuff. And then literally just kind of an open category. um, what one Nuno really wanted to see cosplay, and we did get a cosplay. It was a Skaven glaring angrily at a turnip, and the turnips took on their own life somehow. But there's a lot here to unpack.
It's just see, I thought turnip was like at first I thought I was in on it. And I'm like, oh, you're talking about like orcs essentially, and
Oh,
nope. And I'm like, okay, now I have no idea.
that's its whole a
Yeah.
whole other thing.
If you want to finish up talking about what the gaming aspect, like how you submit on the game side of things, are these 2K battles, 1K? You said you were playing on TTS versus like what was the sort of was there a standardized format that people
No.
adopted? Was it just player games and send us your how did that what did that look like?
Just that, yeah, player games, and so the way mechanically the way our campaign works is, maybe I should explain that to give some context. Is every report is a report. So whether it's assembling an ogre tyrant or playing a game or whatever, every report has a value of 1. And each player was allowed to submit 1 report per type. So each player had a maximum reporting power of 5 if they and some of them uh, did manage to pull off putting in like 5 reports every turn, which is Herculean and not how we intended. But go you guys. But so when a player goes in and submits a report, they are presented with what we call narrative paths. And each coalition, which is the player teams, there's 6 coalitions. Each coalition has 3 narrative paths they can choose from, and each of those 3 paths is opposed by another coalition. So it's always a tug of war against other actual players. And so if you were an expedition player and they're all going to groan at this, you might be paired against the perpetual, the pilgrimage, and the wretched. Um, and I think they got tired of being paired against them, but that's kind of how that works. So then there's 2 other coalitions that you would not fight at all that turn, but then depending on the push and pull of the story, we can switch that up between turns. So it might be next turn you'd be fighting the pilgrimage, and then the soul munchers and the undivided, uh, and that would shift for everyone each turn.
So you keep using this term turn, and I believe there was what 5 weeks, and each week was a turn or something along those lines. What's a turn? Explain that real quick.
um yeah, sorry, I'm fighting with this shoulder pad. Yeah, so a turn was actually 4 days from Thursday through Sunday. And the campaign lasted for 5 turns, and then so I guess a complete turn, you could, I didn't really explain it in these terms, but you would have like the game master turn and then the player turn. So the players would have 4 days to get their reports in, and then we took 3 days to crunch all those reports and create the unfolding narrative and set up the next turn. Um, and we started with 2 day game master turns, but that quickly proved unfeasible, so we went to 3 days.
I see Nuno here, approximately 200 points per week, reports per week for 5 weeks. He's just got the like frustrated emoji, just.
Yeah.
Uh,
So yeah. So yeah. But by the end, we would have come up somewhere over 900 reports for the campaign. It's over 900.
Not bad. I understood that reference.
So yeah, we were dealing with just average 200 reports per turn. So that's 6 teams, each dropping whatever their percentage of that is,
Mhm.
each and every turn, and then the task came back to us to go through all that. So a huge volume of those reports were what we call narrative or writing reports, and that they were exactly that. They were short stories. And by the end of the campaign, we ended up featuring more and more of just people's stories in the unfolding narrative, because just the originality and just inspiration and quality of the writing,
Yeah.
really blew us away. So I very much was left sort of feeling like, well, why should I? And we learned a lot, and we're going to do things a little differently next time on a lot of things, but especially in the last couple of turns, I was left just sort of feeling like the players did such an amazing job. I Why don't I just feature what they wrote and let everyone get a front row seat to read it.
That's amazing. So speaking of, like, can I read the Animosity campaign, how it unfolded? Like, is there a place I can go and just like click through and kind of
Um,
follow the turns, or was that more of a kept Discord or? Um,
no, you can. So it's not entirely updated right now because WordPress decided to completely overhaul their admin interface in the middle of the campaign.
mhm.
So everything I knew about how to build the site for the last 4 years, it's like, well, let's throw that out because we changed everything. Um, so if you go to animositycampaigns.com, there is a tab called Unfolding Narrative, and that uh, probably by the end of next week that will have. I think it has everything up through turn 4, but it doesn't have it doesn't have this last epilogue. It
Yeah.
doesn't have that.
So like a sort of like a wrap up afterward type thing. Yeah,
So a wrap
I've
up afterward that was 60 pages long. Yeah, that.
I've actually had the website up here. That was a trick question the whole time, but I just wanted to make sure that you that You got that plug-in. Um,
Fair enough. But
uh,
yeah, what we also do is after the campaign is over, we go through and we archive everything into what we call the omnibus. So in the next couple of months, there will be an Animosity 2 omnibus, and there is one for Animosity 1, and that is literally 100% of everything our writing, player writing, any and all contributions will be archived in there, and that goes back to what I was telling you before about how with the Warhammer Fantasy version, we suffered a site crash and everything was lost. So it's really important to me that that isn't allowed to happen again.
well, you got to click that button in WordPress to download your data every now and then. Just get in the routine of
Yeah.
doing that. I've lost when I was still at Games Journal, I lost the article that I was the most famous for when I was still a Kotaku contributor. They redid their whole site, and I never kept a copy for myself, so it's just freaking lost to time. Um, and
Yeah.
It's like, man, I really wish I had that original article where I was pseudo famous for my writing. Um, but but here we are. I think I have most of my other journalistic stuff because it only really takes one of those major crashes for you to like kind of learn the lesson, right? It's a hard
Yeah.
lesson to learn though.
More than just our stuff, we certainly want to preserve player contributions. Which,
Right.
speaking of which, do you want to get Chad in here?
Yeah, if Chad would like to join.
No, chat. Do
Oh.
you want to take a break to read chat?
Oh, I've been kind of going along here.
Mm.
34 per week. Uh, Quietus Wood says I'm reading through the omnibus for AI now. I
Yeah,
didn't realize how much.
animosity one.
I didn't realize how much all A2 impacted A1 uh, stakes in retrospect.
Yeah.
So you can omnibust that document out and have reading materials for days.
Yeah, basically.
Sincerest apologies to the delegation.
No, and that's an interesting comment because yeah, Animosity 2 was very much rooted in the aftermath of Animosity 1. And again, even though we only had maybe a third of the players for the last campaign, what happened there directly informed how this unfolded. And even though obviously the players can't see it yet, we do have a dev document open for Animosity 3, and what happened this time will directly inform and have big consequences um, on Animosity 3.
So I'm going to give you an idea for free for next time. Was it
Sure.
Quirk was the Beast Lord assassin of Destiny.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, Quirk.
Yeah.
May I suggest that Nagash resurrects him to be a NPC that goes around just continuing to shiv important figures. You
There's
can have
already
that for free.
there's already a Quark lives hashtag, and debating like well, how much of him has to make it through to still be alive. Like the plague priest bashed his head in.
See, in Nagash we trust, and
Yeah.
the Supreme Lord of the Undead can make it happen.
Yeah.
Quark lives. Quark died. They're yelling back and forth. Ghost Beastman. Nice. Yeah, exactly. See, you can have that. You can have that one for free.
Excellent. And so, just real quick there, you said about Nagash. So Nuno always says, "Don't. No one needs to know how the sausage is made." But there was a location on the map called Mount Nagasua, and it turns out there was a ancient dragon ogre under it, which stomped around for a couple turns.
Hell yeah.
But that ended up on the map because we were sitting in my Games Workshop location one day, me and my wife, and Katie looks up at the shelf and just out of nowhere she says, "Nagash's full name is Nagashua," and it stuck with me, so I had to work that into the map.
Yeah, it's short for Nagashua, like how
Yeah,
Josh is short for Joshua. It makes perfect
yeah.
sense to me. Yeah, no, this tracks. I love it. It also has a little
But
bit of like of a Pan Asian vibe, which is
yeah,
also awesome because I've converted my Nagash to have like the huge like Big Trouble in Little China hat, and we'll soon have a katana. Uh,
very cool.
so, no, about the no one needs to know how the sausage is made. This touches on a little bit. I don't know if it was at the cold open or actually we were talking about here live, but the you said you put points on the map like Nagashua, this mountain or whatever, and you had these little places that people kind of gravitated to on the map, and you just sort of put them there. I mean, that's part of that like evolving back and forth, that dialogue between the game master and the players that makes the organic nature of the storytelling so beautiful. But Stephen King actually has a quote that I often love, and it's the rule of writing I see violated the most often. No one should know how the sausage is made is one way of saying it, but he always says that explanations are anathema to the poetry of suspense.
Yeah.
So you never want to fully explain literally anything.
Yeah.
Literally. You never want to fully explain anything. It ruins it. You should let there be mystery. You should let there be. I mean, this is another quote I also love that says the same thing. It's a meme, and I believe it's from the image is from the old Zelda cartoon.
Okay.
It's magic. I ain't gotta explain shit. Um, so I like that you're holding to these tenets.
Yeah.
Um,
No, absolutely. And as everyone in chat knows, all the players in chat, there's definitely mystery that we have introduced, and in this campaign, again, this started from the last campaign, and it's going to carry over into 3 in some form, but that's up to you guys to figure out how. We introduced what we call the Nemesis, which is without giving.
Stars. Like that
Yeah,
nemesis. Yeah. Just going
well,
around.
without giving anything away, like it's basically a force of uncreation. So we were trying to think like what can you, in a campaign that features all the grand alliances, like what can you have that's a big bad that's an equal threat to everyone, and more than even chaos, it's a force that unmakes things. And we slipped it in as just what started out as this sort of weird mysterious illness, and a missing Lord Celestin at the beginning of the campaign ended up being the major story beat of the last turn. And for the last turn, we introduced what we call collaborative narrative paths. So instead of being opposed, the two coalitions are working toward the same objective, and the amount of reports that are submitted determines how successful they are. And we, after 4 turns, as again, chat knows, and I'm sure you can see it in the smack talk being thrown around, like they 4 turns of fighting had gotten a lot of rivalries going, and like I joked, I think in the pilgrimage chat, I was like, when the update dropped, I had a player just type, "Alex, what have you done?" And I just reply, "Now kiss." So we took the coalitions that hated each other and made them have to work together, and not all of them did.
Amazing.
Which was a lot of, it very much lived up to the name Animosity, because that there was a certain amount of like, well, we talked with the other team and they say they're on board, but they might leave us hanging.
Amazing. No, uh, that sounds awesome. Real quick here, we got chat. Prime Dominion sausage. That's a fantastic hashtag. We'll get that trending on the internet real quick. Um,
Yeah, Prime Dominion is going to be the name of Animosity 3.
okay. The Caleb says, "Love Big Trouble Little China." I gotta throw this out here. This is the Tyrants together. Right on.
Yeah.
Right on, right on. Big Trouble in Little China. So what is it? Brent, I believe, from Rerolling Once just shared a tweet today. What hobbies do you have outside of Age of Sigmar? And it's like, I've got some stories published. I am a writer. I wouldn't call myself an author yet. I've made some money, but I don't have like a fully non-digital published work in existence, and I've just set that as an imaginary goal for me. Is like as soon as I have a physical book to show for all my efforts, then I'm an author. But for now, I am a writer, and let me tell you, with my English lit education from University of Wisconsin Eau Claire, that Big Trouble in Little China is the best, technically best script ever written. And you can at me on the internet right now at Mr. Mr_Meph, MEPH. If you disagree, you're wrong. But everyone is entitled to their wrong opinion. Big Trouble in Little China is the best. It's not my favorite movie, but from a script standpoint, from a writer's stance, you know, a lot of the stuff you're kind of taught when you're writing is it's all about conflict, which is something that Animosity, like you said, the name kind of says it all. Conflict is at the center of all great storytelling. The conflict can be as simple as character wants a sandwich. What is stopping character from getting the sandwich in this scene, right? And then that
Yeah.
conflict that occurs, like the store is closed. Well, damn it, like it's Monday, it's 10 o'clock, it's supposed to be open. I can't get my fucking sandwich. And like now you have conflict, right? I mean, this is every Coen's brother film ever. Is it takes conflict and gives it to characters that are incapable of dealing with it, which is why Coen Brothers flicks are so great. That's the Dude Abides, the Big Lebowski, which might actually be my favorite movie. What's the conflict? Someone pees on his rug. Like it's just like conflict, and you're just constantly introducing conflicts so scene to scene. And with a game like Animosity, with this campaign narrative, I mean the conflict is pretty simple in terms of you have two players playing against each other. What's stopping me from getting it? The other player, right? But you've kind of added degrees. Look at that segue. Look at that masterful segue right there. You've added degrees of conflict on top of it through the narrative, through the coalitions, through these GM actions, and then through giving the players additional avenues to sort of, let's say, compete with each other. But yeah, compete with each other, sharing photos and racking up their points each turn and stuff like that. And I think that's part of the genius of this from a narrative, from a actual writing standpoint. I think this is brilliant.
Yeah, no, and it is a competitive experience. Like it's still a war game. You're still supposed to be waging a war, and you're still trying to win it. So, from that standpoint, it very much is a competitive
Right.
endeavor.
And then it's hard to fight fully explaining things. As a world builder, it's the hardest habit to fight constantly. And then Caleb Kane, this is a kind of a back and forth that happened here in chat that I think is pertinent. Show don't tell, I feel kind of goes a long way to that too. So yeah, show don't tell is another tenet of writing as well as like good film. And as a GM, as a writer, I mentioned before like how you put stuff on the map and like you didn't necessarily have like like hey, let's put this on here, and then people like really gravitated towards it. So then you have to come up with the why, even if you never reveal the why, right? For me, one of my big struggles as a world builder, as a writer, is I do want to tell you just how clever the thing that just happened truly is, but you gotta fight it. You can't reveal all the secrets to what makes it such a cool thing. We all have those moments when you build a world and you're like, I just want to tell you how awesome the thing is that's going on. You don't even know, but you got to fight it. You got to fight it, and you got to show them the sort of zoomed out view without getting into the what's behind the curtain, right?
Yeah, and there's a just to reference the people in chat. So Tectonic Dan, I asked him, like he had been asking, like in the run up, he's like, is there anything I can do to help? And I was working on the map. I was like, just give me a list of names that I can populate this map with. And he went above and beyond and came up with a bunch of really cool descriptions. I'm like, oh, these are neat, but it was just like one paragraph each. And I added most of them into the map, and so we certainly want to have that level of world building already in place. But yeah, then through player actions, like things and the unfolding narrative, a lot of those things that Dan thought up as just silly little hooks that people could play around with became something much bigger. So Kai Leonis, who you've mentioned, who I know is in chat. So like one of Dan's additions was Orca, which is basically an anglerfish that's also a giant squig.
Metal.
So, but by the end of the campaign, the lake was drained, so all the water was gone. But then it was refilled with Aether Sea, so everything was flying. So then I'm pretty sure Kai, who is a Bretonian ghost, charged the Urwhale, which was the corpse of a dead god beast. Charged that while riding Orca. I believe I read that right. So
I just hear a heavy metal riff in the background right now, just down in hell, like hell yeah.
Basically. Yeah, we're taking Warhammer back to its metal album cover roots.
Yeah, you got to get the Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, like Dio, like cover work. I mean, if you don't evoke that with your story in Warhammer, what are you even doing? I think that's ultimately the problem I have with 40K, is that like I don't get the heavy metal album cover from it,
Yeah,
and I know some people disagree with it, but I'm like, it doesn't quite, maybe a
it used
little.
to be more prevalent.
Yeah, it's a little bit more like prog rock now, I guess. um, so catching back up with chat, Kai Leonis says, in many ways, you're also competing against yourself to push harder, do more, write better, and the normal plot, and trying to get into meta plot. So I actually think that this is, I mean, even in my match play sort of tournament experience, my first opponent is always myself. In content creation, my first opponent is me. Like, I am
Yeah,
a person who is constantly sort of fighting with myself to be better. Um, that helps motivate me. I think your mileage may vary as an individual with something like that. Um, but I do think it's giving people more avenues to interact with a story is just always the right way to go about it. Nuno, I was discussing with Alex whether players should be able to explore the locations on the map in the first turn, and Alex pushed to shove coalition against each other immediately. He was right. You got to get
yeah.
that conflict, right?
Mhm.
It starts with conflict.
Well, and
Go ahead.
as I explained to Nuno, the old fantasy campaigns were map based, and I'm sure Kai is screaming in the chat because he remembers this. What would happen is like the first 4 turns, because the old campaigns would run literally like 3 months, and the first month would just be diplomacy and sort of like eating up the empty spots on the map and just sort of jockeying around each other until like one coalition would finally poke another one. I'm just like, nope, you're fighting.
Hmm.
And then I did not design diplomacy into this at all, but literally the first turn, I'm like, all right, you're fighting over a storm vault. And the perpetual and the expedition are like, no, we're not. We're going to make a treaty and we're going to share it. We're going to be best friends. I'm just
Amazing,
like, okay, that happened. All right, cool.
amazing, amazing flashbacks. Says Kai Leonis. Um,
Yeah.
let's see where was I? G Dad says this is at me now. Tell us how cool this gave an invasion to Anvilgard was going to be. This is referencing my Soulbound game that's been going on
Okay.
Fridays. Uh, to
That's
answer
good
your
news.
question, G Dad, it was going to be so cool, but they thwarted that. I mean, it was going to be a real invasion. Now it's just like a distraction. So,
Right.
dang it. There's that wanting to explain your how clever your big goddamn plot was, right? But you gotta leave the mystery. Just like a kid in the candy store with that combo. I charged the hell out of the Urwhale. A giant angry mangler fish.
Manglerfish squig.
Well, I believe we have new art to get commissioned. The heavy metal album cover for Animosity. I support this.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would be remiss if I did not mention that the big bad, we wrapped that story up with a Lord Celestant literally saying, "You've been thunderstruck." So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that was literally the apex of the meta plot.
So you know why that's awesome?
I had a lot of fun writing that.
That's amazing. Like, what was the Pacific Rim?
Yeah,
We won't talk about Pacific Rim 2. I've never seen it. Maybe it's good.
no,
I don't know. But Pacific Rim
it's
1
not.
is just one big punchline. It's a Jaeger bomb. Like, that's the
I
punchline.
I see what you did there.
It's a Jaeger bomb. That's the punchline. I'm like, yes! Yes! like, like they stop an alien invasion by giving it a Jaeger bomb. You're right. Jaeger bombs do ruin my night. Like, they go awesome initially, but then they always spiral from there.
When you put it that way.
um, I love Hilmar Thunderstruck, or Long Live Hilmar Thunderstruck.
Yeah, that was the Lord Celestant was Omar Thunderstruck. So
I like
we
that.
gave him that line.
I like that.
Like I knew I had to have him say that.
Fantastic. It seems like your players are super receptive of what you did. So you guys, I mean,
Yeah.
did some excellent work there.
No,
Um,
we couldn't ask for better. And just on that note, there is on Spotify there's an Animosity playlist, which is all music that has inspired me since way back when, and Thunderstruck is on it. So
See, I often listen to music when I'm getting in the mood of writing myself. Actually, every title for every adventure in the Soulbound campaign I'm running is a music title.
nice.
So
I can respect that.
yeah, the first one was the Big Come Down, which is a Nine Inch Nails song. I had the Wretched, which is also a Nine Inch Nails song. Been listening to a lot of Nine Inch Nails. It turns out. You mentioned like how you have the Nemesis, right?
Yeah,
Which is this sort of unmaking. Um, I think you've done something that's really clever with having a uniform bad guy, right? Um, there's a lot of fun to be had in playing in the shades of gray, but to have like the end point, to have that like sort of that Kefka or
yeah,
Sephiroth or that thing that you is just the bad is really important. Age of Sigmar is actually doing this to a lesser extent with their sort of yearly unfurling games themselves. It was Nagash was the big
hmm
bad evil guy, which is kind of interesting
yeah,
because he doesn't usually take that main seat very often. Now we're kind of moving, kind of rotating into where it's back with Archaon, and I think we're going to see Slanesh very shortly. Having that uniform bad guy from a storytelling stance in a linear thing that you read is very very important. When you're talking animosity with which is played in 3 dimensions with multiple sort of actors, um, it's good to have that umbrella, and I think that's really really awesome too. Uh, I
yeah,
suspect that this is going to carry into Animosity 3, so I won't ask for spoilers, but
yeah. Uh, no, it's going to be a recurring theme. But what I also want to stress for the players in chat, like what form it takes next time around, it is going to be different. Like it's not going to be the same thing over again. So even though there will be an aspect of that there, it'll be up to you guys to figure it out again. Uh, and we the last two blurbs in the unfolding narrative do actually tease that and what it's going to look like next time.
see, I love Velatron's here says Alex and the team pulled out the most amazing narrative event I've ever taken part. I'm hooked and am looking forward to the Little Soldier and Animosity 3. So I mean
Hey,
that's I mean think about like the struggles you kind of had this year. I think with just the practical aspect we've all had to kind of struggle with in our lives of what isolation and a global pandemic means. Um, that you were able to sort of adapt and use it to your benefit, really, I think really speaks volume to the sort of efforts you put in, and of course the sort of team you had behind you. Now that's
yeah,
something I do want to kind of talk about. Is this is a massive undertaking? You're talking 200 sub, 200 submissions a week or whatever, or
yeah.
reports, I'm sorry, a week. You had to have like a solid team, and I know Nuno's here in chat. It's you. Do you want to give us an idea of like the scope of the sort of the gears, the cogs that make this machine work? That obviously you're a big part of, and you
Yeah.
certainly had some help. Like what kind of help did you need for this kind of undertaking? How many chefs did you need on the line?
So we have 7 people on the team, including myself. My buddy Peter and I, we do most of the writing. Well, not most. We do basically all the writing with uh, help from Nuno and help from Warboss Kurgan. So like a lot of the big locations around the map. So your Bolyani, Satreya, etc. Uh, that was Kurgan actually who wrote those in the first place. So Kurgan helps with sort of front end development, and just being a wise and sage person. Nuno pulled weight with doing promotional work and getting the word out there, and just generally being a cheerleader. We wouldn't have gotten over the finish line this year without Nuno, so we absolutely owe this to him. So thank you for that, Nuno.
You even had a
Um,
freaking theatrical trailer, which was pretty epic.
yeah, and that was 100. Like the old campaigns had them, and like I had reached out to the guy who did them back then, but then He flaked out on me, and I was just like, yeah, whatever. And yeah, like that was 100% Nuno's vision and execution. That was not me at all. So that was really great to see.
Yeah, amazing.
As I mentioned before, my lovely wife drew the map and also did the teaser image for Animosity 3. Um, a big shout out to Cosgrove. So one of our team members, Cosgrove, like his job originally when I recruited him was going to be tabletop rules development. But then, so like all the figureheads were supposed to have custom war scrolls, but with a really limited gaming aspect, that didn't happen. Um, but he jumped in and he became the Discord moderator, and he like I think it became this like weird point of pride with him that he read everything in every Discord channel, like all campaign long, to make sure y'all were behaving in there. Which I absolutely did not do because, literally, players were with the time zones. Players were working in shifts. So, like you had the morning crew, and then you had the afternoon crew, and then they would summarize for like when the morning crew came back around, and it was just an around the clock thing.
It's kind of amazing.
Because each coalition had their own private communication channels in the Discord. So, and those are still up, and players are still actively communicating, and like they're figuring out their post game storyline and narrative, and like what that's going to be going into next time.
That's amazing. So, Animosity 3, do you know roughly when that's going to happen? Like, it is going to happen. You've talked about it. You got some of the groundwork working already, but when are we blocking off our calendars next year?
So right now we're just leaving it to summer 2021 because we don't know even what the year's going to look like.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, that's what's on the poster. Just sometime between June and uh, what we kicked off early August. So yeah, so sometime around July. And before I move too far on there, in a way, our most important team member is actually uh, Nick, aka Bythier, who he does our game engine, which I know has been a source of confusion and mystery for a lot of players. But our game engine that actually crunches all this stuff, that's 100% built by Nick. So he's kind of the functional artificial heart of that makes everything else work. So
mm-hmm.
uh,
Quietus Wood says shout out to Mura too. Mura, Mura. Not certain who that is.
well, so she isn't on the team, but she did chip in on uh, going into the end game. We the Urwale rose up on the Aether Sea, and Nuno did another trailer with his own art for the Urwale, this god beast corpse rising up into the sky, with gut rot spumes, rot kraken attaching cables to it at the same time.
Down and new.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Mira helped with the art on that.
Awesome.
Uh, but yeah, no, it was definitely a team effort, and it couldn't have been pulled off without any one of again the seven of us. Yes, for anyone out there who watches The Boys, we are the seven.
All right.
But anyway, just a quick reference in there. But yeah, so yeah, we had a really good team. I had a really good team, and then we collectively as a team couldn't have asked for better players.
Hmm.
Uh, I've said it several times now, but you guys are amazing.
Well, I
Uh,
mean that driving that organic interest in the growing the community, kind of, I'm going to say the right way versus the wrong way, but that sort of organic, direct growth of a community, I think, really pays dividends as you get to develop and go forward. And obviously, you had the groundwork for something like this going back, 10 years worth of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, but to kind of port that into Age of Sigmar, maintain some of your sort of tenets from then. and then just kind of evolve it into this new this new big world. Uh, do you think that the Age of Sigmar universe being such a blank slate compared to, like, say, the Warhammer Fantasy world that was, do you think that's been a good thing or a bad thing, or maybe a mix of both?
So I'd say it's apples and oranges because what Animosity did back in the day was it explored parts of the map that Games Workshop abandoned. Because I mean, for the most part, everything was the Empire and a little bit of Bretonia and sometimes Lizardman country. Um, but Animosity started by exploring Araby, and then it went to Cathay, and then it went to Astalia, and it ended up in Kislev. So there was never an Animosity that actually took place in the old world. I think the closest they got was the Sea of Claws, which was north of the Empire.
So you were already kind of filling in the
Yeah,
tapestry that was a little
yeah.
left a little bit blank by GW, because I mean they one of the big criticisms I hear for Age of Sigmar lore is like, oh, there's not a whole lot of it. I'm like, well, it's new, like give them some
Well,
things.
and at this point, 5 years in, I would which that this literally we announced Animosity 2 on the 5 year anniversary day.
Hmm.
I wouldn't even say that that's necessarily true. Like I have so many Age of Sigmar Black Library novels. Like my reading stack is literally off the shelf at this point. Like the lore is there. People just need to actually go read it. Like I think the difference is that Warhammer Fantasy had what by the time they killed it, it had 8 editions worth of just seeping into the general consciousness.
Hmm.
So like I'm building now that I finished the Tyrant, I switched gears and I'm putting some Lumineth together here, and I've read the Battle Tome. I'm gonna pick up the novel that's coming out and add that on the stack of stuff I haven't read. Um, but I love their lore, but I mean their lore is what 2 months old at this point. No one it hasn't gotten into the consciousness of the player base yet.
Right. I mean, it's interesting because, like, this is what I call the get goodening of the sort of timeline. It's kind of like the quickening from Highlander.
Yeah,
As the game goes on, the average skill of the player raises. I call it the get goodening. I think that the consciousness of lore also increases. That sort of lore IQ also increases as time progresses. The quote unquote casual who's never read a Black Library book or even their battle tome just knows more,
yeah.
points of lore as the game progresses. I think that's a very important thing that we kind of need to give ourselves a break a little bit on in terms
I'd
of the
agree with it. Yeah,
in terms of the community and stuff like.
because that'll creep up just in your normal game store conversation. And I mean, I've learned a lot about the Horus Heresy books, and I've only read the first like I don't know, like the first five or whatever, because that's all that really interested me. But I've picked up plenty from the others, just from people talking about it, and it's interesting for me to hear this back and forth like about the different Space Marine legions and everything, because Horus Heresy is in its current form only goes back about 10 years.
Mhm.
Like I remember when it was just like, well, Horus betrayed the Emperor and Siege of Terra, and like,
Yeah,
well, that's it.
killed
That's
killed
what happened.
yeah, killed my boy Sanguinius, that douchebag. Like,
Yeah, like you had the betrayal at Istvan, and then you had the Siege of Terra, and like that's it. That's your Horus Heresy.
yeah,
But again, you can see very organically like how they've written a bunch of fresh lore, and then how that's seeping into the consciousness as players talk about it.
yeah,
And
yeah. I
I
think
think Age of Sigmar just needs more time for that to happen, and it's going to continue to happen as they fill in the world. Because like even I just built this Tyrant, but if you go back, not that long ago, Gutbusters basically didn't. We had models, but they didn't exist in the lore.
hmm. Hmm.
But they are getting in there.
Right,
But
right. Before I bury this comment too much, Velatron says, question to Alex: will the little soldier keep us busy until A3?
so just touch on that real quick, so you know what he's talking about. So I'm as a content creator yourself, you can probably tell me I'm making a terrible mistake. But I do want to get into content creation just with my own hobby projects and share a lot of the creativity that ironically, for the last 2 months, I haven't really been able to do because I've been running the campaign.
No, no, it happens.
Like I'm sitting here building my models that I've been staring at since before this started. But yeah, so the little soldier. I mean, it won't be as interactive as as Animosity
Well,
was,
so
but
real quick, what is the little soldier in case for folks who
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know, for folks who don't know, and then the answer. Yeah.
So the little soldier is basically going to be if you've watched how can I describe this? So if you've seen anything of Anthony Bourdain's like Parts Unknown, like
Love Bourdain. Yeah.
it's that except with me and wargaming, and I don't mean that to sound egotistical at all, but like that's basically the premise is just me talking about my hobby as I live it. So
This is the second rantcast in a row we've talked about Anthony Bourdain now. So
I
he's got whatever's going on in the zeitgeist. He's on everyone's mind. But brilliant. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So okay.
Um, so yeah, that's basically what it's going to be. So what we're I say we because I'm so used to talking about the team. What I will be working on to start with is what I'm calling a tale of one warlord times four. So it's me taking on four army projects at once,
Mm, mm.
and that's actually what I'm working on right now. So I'm gonna have it's gonna be set in the aftermath of Animosity 2, but so I'm going to be working on. It's going to be a Path to Glory campaign, so just small numbers of units, but it's going to be Vicardo Valencia and his Greywater Fastness army,
Right on.
allied with the Seventh Legion of Syar, which is actually a player army that he gave me his blessing to paint my models as. So that's going to be one faction, and then we're going to have Beast Claw Raiders. We're going to have Flesh Eater Courts, and we're gonna have Corn Bloodbound.
I'm happy
And
you've got a death army in there. So thank you.
yeah, um, yeah, no, I mean, all the Grand Alliances are represented there. So four Grand Alliances, four factions. But so yeah, it's literally just gonna be Path to Glory of me, assembling, painting, and hopefully getting to pit some of these models against each other.
Okay, so I mean, essentially, this is your aspirations. The little
Yeah,
soldier is essentially your aspirations to build some content that's sort of
yeah.
going year round. Right on.
Yeah, the little soldier is very much me and my personal hobby, and even though that's going to have a cross section with Animosity, it's not Animosity. It's a totally separate entity. That's just me.
Right on. If I may,
Yeah.
100% do it. By the way, you have a good cadence with your voice. So,
Oh
I mean, it's not quite Doug. I mean, Doug is like this
no,
the
no.
sultry baron of the airwaves. But
the, the David Attenborough of Age of Sigmar. Yeah.
yeah, it's Doug and Halo. Oh, I think have the two greatest voices
Yeah.
in our. They just have that like that baritone, but Doug's got that like a little bit of the like that like he's got a little. It's got a little sultry.
Yeah. No, I did going into this, and a lot of our players we owe to Doug. Like, no, I did about 30 minutes with him, and I know what you mean. But
I'm still waiting for the OnlyFriends ASMR Doug page personally, but just like
fair.
um, I derailed myself.
Yeah,
I derailed the whole show.
I'm just thinking about. I'm thinking about Doug's OnlyFans now. Thanks. Yeah, I don't even know what I was doing before. Appreciate that.
Never fallen asleep to AOS retrospective ASMR before Halo.
Oh, so that was actually the comment I was going to throw in there is during the campaign I actually sent an to Halo, but he didn't answer it, which was a screenshot of one of our players making the comment. If we want to stay competitive in the narrative, we need to take that town. And that's just the most beautiful thing I've ever read. After the last, 3 or 4 years of just the Twitter dialogue of narrative versus
I don't like it.
competitive play. No, I don't either. I don't feel there's necessarily there needs to be a distinction there, but
Right, right.
and that's why I love that comment so much. Like, if we want to stay competitive in the narrative,
Yeah.
like that's just beautiful to me.
No, it's that sort of two worlds, in harmony.
So
I like that the Halo ASMR stuff is here. Soren says my darling uses his select an army video to sleep. Just saying. Oh God,
Fair.
I've opened a can of worms.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I have like a radio voice I do for ads when I do them, and when I hear it, I'm like, who the fuck is that guy? Because it's like that
Fair.
really like hammy like tune in. What the fuck, man? Uh,
So I can feel my players flinching every time you swear because we
oh,
had
I'm
a very
sorry.
strict no swearing policy on the Discord. So
Yeah,
so
honor his no swearing policy, everybody. But this is a mature
yeah,
show. It's got the mature label on everything. I've got my it's one of the things that keeps me from growing as
fair.
huge as I could. But I know that as a parent with two kids, I'm like okay at censoring myself around them, and then they're like,
Right.
"Dad, that's a naughty word," and I'm like, "Yep, I'm sorry."
Yeah.
And then
No,
like the English lit major in me goes like, "There's no such thing as bad words, only bad context and bad usage," and like. Well,
right.
there's a couple real like truly bad words, but like for the most part, swears aren't not bad words. What
No,
God.
no. So
Don't
well,
censor
and
me, child. What do you know about the world?
that's a good way to put it. Well, and so I actually adopted that because the last 2 years I've spent gaming in a Games Workshop location, and that has a very they have a very strict no swearing
Well,
policy, and compared to the local friendly quote unquote friendly local game store that I came from before, and I think you mentioned Paul's name in chat, so he knows what I'm talking about. Like I feel like the no swearing helps create a more positive community
mhm.
because again, like if I go to the FLGS, like it's just people swearing all the time, and they uh,
Well, I think it's important because I mean you don't know people's plights and stuff, and so like I
yeah,
drop f bombs pretty freely, and like if you know me, you know how like amicable I am and outgoing and
yeah,
pretty like. But if you don't, and you're just standing there walking into the store and you hear me dropping like three f bombs in a row, like
yeah,
that could seem like a hostile environment. And I think what's some lead there's sort of a we've kind of lost sight of a little bit the sort of child gamer like growing up and growing into our community. I think there are some there are some initiatives like we have the like Young Bloods tournaments and we have now we've got that like Warhammer Kids sort of comic and manga type stuff going around. Like there are some drives for it with the GW store actually kind of making it more approachable by having some no swearing policies. I think all that stuff is very, very good. Again, context. Like, what is the context? Where are you? Is very, very important. My show has a mature label on it because we talk about some heavy subjects. I'm
yeah,
not going to parent your children when they come here and hear me talk about, mental health and suicide and things like that. Like,
yeah.
my show is not equipped to screen that for a child. That's why the mature tag is there. Um,
Yeah,
so,
and I think it's perfectly it's what I put. So there's a locked rules channel, and like for politics and religion, like I put there like there is a time and place for it, and it's not here.
mhm,
You know,
yeah.
and I think with everything like you were just saying, you know, your channel is a time and place for that, and that's perfectly fine.
Right, and Doug's got a no swearing policy. He made the decision really early on in his content. Vince is got another one of those no swearing sort of policies. And my
Yeah,
greatest fear was I was just going to drop like f bombs left and right when I was on his show the first time. I'm just like I'm
right.
going to swear so
Yeah,
much.
and we know Honest Wargamer does not have any compunction about that.
Well, that's I mean British, right? Like it's a little bit different, and and I don't know. It's interesting. It's because it's those things that you got to think about. Is it lighthearted? Is it angry? Is it Velatron with 2,000 biddies says, "Thanks, gents. Really enjoying the show. Thank you so much for the biddies." Um, yeah,
And I need to get Caleb's swearing here real quick in my apparent radio voice here. Gut rot's moldering loincloth.
what is my favorite in character swear. Yeah,
No.
yeah. I see. I'm with the Soulbound show. I have been trying to mitigate my language a lot. But there's a difference between like you see a huge maw crusher, You see this Maw Crusher? It's fucking huge. Like I don't need to.
Yeah. It's a, yeah.
It's a
Well,
gargantuan beast, like it's a galley's height. Like,
yeah. So there, my wife and I, Katie, I'd say we play a lot of Borderlands 3, but that was mostly before Animosity consumed me. But yeah, there's a line delivery in there, which is, it's a big fucking dinosaur. That's what you reminded me of. Like, there's just no other way to really
sometimes it's
capture that.
right, right. Like sometimes, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Um, yeah, language and writing and dialogue and those things are things I often think about. But um, my show was more about. I don't need to honk my own show while you're on it, but a lot more going for
Okay.
like the authentic me,
Yeah.
and the authentic me is one type of way, and it's like I don't. It's hard to like filter myself and my passion and all these things and go on my weird
No,
tangents and rants, and I think about
I
the
mean,
the
it is called RantCast, so
right, right, and you got the Happy Gilmore scene where he's swearing at the ball, and I'm like, when I don't remember how young I was when I saw Happy Gilmore. Like the ball won't go to its home, and it cuts to the camera and just bleeping every other word. Um, did you not see this movie?
I have not.
Oh my gosh, it's one of the fun. This is why you have a no swearing policy. You never knew the joy of Happy Gilmore swearing at a golf ball. Um,
I
or
mean,
the like early Adam Sandler movie. You had like Billy
yeah.
Madison and yeah.
No, so I have seen Billy Madison multiple times, because yeah.
Yeah.
No, early Adam Sandler is something the wife has forced me to watch, so
Yeah, disgusting.
I get it.
It's I don't like I can't defend Adam Sandler these days, but I can't deny the like impressionable youth I was thinking that him fighting Bob Barker was the funniest thing I'd ever seen.
Oh, so while we're talking about movies, I have to jump way back and say that I think I would argue with you about the best script in that I feel it's Mad Max Fury Road, but technically that was not a script. That was a massive storyboard. So
Yeah, yeah. So win on technicality here.
yeah, um, so that movie had no script.
No, I mean Mad Max was Fury Road is I think I'd hazard to say like I mean that's in that category of best movie. You
Yeah.
know, like I would never call Big Trouble in Little China the best movie. I
Right.
specifically isolate out the script
Yeah.
because of the sort of marvel of like writing that it was working on. Even the like the trope that they were making fun of at the time, which was the trend in the 80s, you got to remember is like, you know, white guy goes to Asia and saves the day, right? Like we had
Yeah.
that whole slew of schlock films like that. And Jack Burton is way out of his element and like comedic relief while this entire plot he has no business being in like
Right.
unfurls around him, right? Like the first thing he does in the climactic fight at the end is shoot the ceiling and knock himself out. Like, like he just
Right.
and they set up the like the sort of Deus Ex Machina. It's all in the reflexes really early on, where he just unintentionally they give him
Right.
this one liner. It's just like this. I
No,
can't.
I agree with what you're saying there. So
No, a big
um,
but Fury Road is. I mean, this is if you're like, what is peak action movie of substance? I'm like Fury Road,
yeah.
and yeah, I mean,
And I think in my own writing, and maybe this will resonate with the players in chat. I think I wanted to try to emulate some of that feeling you get if you have seen Fury Road, which you absolutely should.
yeah. Stop
Of
the show
just
right now and go watch it, and then come
yeah,
back to yeah,
thanks. Which is just that sort of relentless. I mean, that there was a breather in the middle of the film, but still, just that sort of relentless, high stakes pace where you end up exhausted by the end of it. And I thought that was very much what I was trying to go for.
yeah.
There were certainly, bringing the conversation back around to Animosity, like there, in hindsight, there were certainly missteps that
Look
were
at you
made.
being look at that segue. You're ready to be a content creator. You got it, man. Let's go.
Thanks. But no, there were missteps and story beats that didn't land, just right. But a lot of, we've talked about this in what we call the cave. A lot of what we learned in this campaign, like to do it better, we had to have this growing experience, and we had to do it this time to be able to make it better next time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just stuff that we tried our best, and some things worked and some things didn't. And we'll next time we'll learn more. But a lot of reading through a lot of the feedback, because we open channels for an autopsy, and let everyone say their piece, and we wanted that feedback. But I am very confident that most everything that players have raised as issues are things that we can and will address next time. We already have solutions in the works, and we know what we need to do better.
uh, K. Leonis, right now I am tired enough. I might only be able to hashtag charge some things. um, no, pace is I think pace is the most important part of like that sort of interactive game experience, like pace in video games, pace in tabletop RPGs, pace in a campaign, pace of play in an actual match play game, or even like you talk about like Exploding Kittens or some of these like board games that like are really popular around my house. The reason they're engaging and that we enjoy them so much is pacing and pacing. It's just it's one of those things that's near impossible to like just write it, and like, oh, and then the beat happens here and the beat happens here, and like
Yeah,
it's like a music, like 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. You think it's going to be like music, and you're like, oh, that beat didn't land at all, and so now it went dut dut nee flatlined duh,
yeah,
and so like your pace is one of those things that you're just always kind of aware of, and being aware of it is one of the biggest parts of it. And then from there, it's getting better with time, stacking successes, learning your own style, learning your audience, something that lands, a beat that lands for one audience could completely miss another. um this is GMing. I getting to the point where, like, as a GM, I'm casting my parties these days because I'm trying to look for the right personality types to go together for like the story I want to tell, as opposed to just being like, oh, everyone come play my game, or like first
yeah,
five people to sign up come play my game. It's such a challenge. And I think you have essentially like an open sign up style. I mean, you have this big undertaking, this big challenge of being like, okay, now I've got, you know, 200 reports a week from players, and I know many of them, but I may not know all of them. And are they going to buy into the heavy metal whale in the sky thing?
right,
Are they gonna be along for some of this stuff? And I think a lot of that comes from honesty and storytelling. If
right,
you're sincere in what you're trying to evoke, if you're sincere in what you're trying to deliver from the beginning, I think your players respond to that. Um,
yeah,
you know,
and
and that's why I swear, because I'm honest. Sorry, go on.
you're an honest wargamer.
Ouch. No, no. I'll leave that to better folks, more honest than myself.
Fair. So and just to go on a rant of my own here. That was something that was really amazing to see, was the amount of players returning, and you've already said RantCast is a safe space, so I'm going to dip into some dark humor here. The amount of players returning that I knew, especially those that I knew personally, I could count on my remaining fingers. Um, Sorry, I had to get the dark humor in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so it was really great seeing so many people that I genuinely, I don't know before this, and then watching. I had to quote Vin Diesel in a tweet I made on the official Twitter account, where I said
Was
that
it I am Groot?
not, no, animosity doesn't have friends. We have family.
Mm-hmm.
Get that Fast and Furious reference in there, because it was really great seeing the different coalitions gel together in their own, like, really unique ways. And I unfortunately, the Undivided, the sort of generic chaos faction, didn't really have enough players to really have that chemistry, and I'm genuinely sorry about that because I feel like those players missed out. But in the pretty much every other coalition had this really great chemistry, but each of them was also really different. And like you were saying about holding a D&D game where, or a role-playing game where it's first however many people to sign up, that is how the coalitions were formed. It was just join whatever you want, and then seeing how those personalities came together, and especially in the case of the perpetual in particular come to mind, really creating a family, and the pilgrimage too, everyone honestly, just some really great groups of people with their own sort of chemistry and dynamic.
So if I may, regarding your Chaos Undivided problem,
Yeah.
you got to be specific. Undivided is a broad term. So Miyazaki, I don't know if you watch anime at all. I'm trying to get references in here that you might
Yeah.
know. But Miyazaki was once asked, why do you make films for, like, why do you always make films about magical little girls or for little girls or whatever? Spirited
No,
Away,
I was
uh,
gonna say Spirited Away is Katie's favorite movie of all time. So yes, I'm familiar.
Princess Mononoke, Castle in the Sky, like Nausicaa, like all of these are like essentially plots about little girls and magic. Almost,
Yeah.
we won't talk about Grave of the Fireflies, but like almost universally. And he was asked, "Why do you do this?" And he said, "When you write something for everybody, you don't find an audience. When you write something for one person, you get an audience." And he said it in a very far more eloquently than I can possibly paraphrase the quote as, but essentially that like Chaos Undivided, and I think one of the struggles with like Slaves to Darkness are really freaking awesome. I mean, they're heavy metal dot army, right? Like dot
Yeah.
JPEG. But but when you're talking about like from a narrative, it's such a broad stroke that it's hard to like pick a sort of resonant detail and cling to that, and then from there you get all the people who sort of see it and interpret it and go in their different directions. Like, oh, what's this to me? So I mean, it's
Well,
a go ahead, yeah.
Undivided, that was it was really, kind of sad for me seeing their sort of narrative fall a little bit flat, because it was actually going into it. It was the primary narrative that, besides the meta plot, that carried over from the previous campaign. So in Animosity One, the Undivided were very much divided in that we had two Chaos factions, and it was two Varangard, Irkut the Spineless, and Karang Sarn. And Irkut the Spineless dug a Enlightenment engine that hadn't been modified by Grungni, so it was a genuine Teclisian Enlightenment engine, and he dug that up out of the ruins and ended up carrying it over into this campaign. And so basically, what we did in the story was that a character that we literally called the emissary, which was an emissary from Archaon, another Varangard showed up and knocked their heads together, and they're like, "Hey, you guys are going to work together because you might have found the secrets to god binding that the elves use to bind Slanesh." So a big plot that I had kind of you were saying about your Skaven invasion there and that not happening, like something that could have happened but didn't, was that the the Undivided would end up using this Enlightenment engine to and the knowledge that Irkut had gotten out of it to bind the soul of the soul and body of the Urwale between realms,
Mhm.
and that didn't end up happening. But like literally, and the players will get the reference. Everything you've seen in like the last turn, referring to the God Beast Nura, like literally, if Chaos had won the Cathedral of the Mariner path on turn two, Nura would have been bound between realms as a test fire, like when you get your Rogue One test firing of the Death Star, like that was what I had planned. But that didn't come off, so now we have a rogue Godbeast spirit.
Well, I mean,
But
that's pretty awesome.
yeah, it is pretty awesome. But like I definitely had things that I wanted to see the Undivided do, And the joke was, the joke in the juxtaposition was that we named them the Undivided, but their figureheads were two Varangard who hate each other's guts. And there was that sort of push and pull where Karing Sarn embodies Nurgle and Khorne, and then Irkut the Spineless embodied, emphasis on he did, uh, Zinch and Slanesh, and sort of their traits. And he got turned into a spawn because he failed 3 times in a row. So,
Well, I mean,
um,
I see. I think the solution here is in the delivery and not in the what you got there.
yeah,
The plot and the meta details.
yeah,
It's just
no,
yeah. I'm sure
the
you got your
Undivided was something. Yeah, the Undivided were definitely something that didn't land the way I intended them
yeah,
to.
but you've got ideas obviously going forward.
So yeah, I think going into Prime Dominion, Animosity 3, the Prime Dominion, there's not going to be just your sort of generic chaos bad guy faction. I that wasn't how I wrote the Undivided, but that's kind of what they ended up being,
Hmm.
and that wasn't what I hoped for them. But
Yeah, you gotta go specific, go spirited away, man.
yeah,
Uh,
I think just we kind of had a start in breaking up the grand alliances, but I think that cast typing is hard to get away from. That because it was funny because one of the, getting toward the end of the campaign, I think turn 4, um, the expedition, which were sort of the generic good guys, they were like, well, we have to go stop chaos. Like I finally paired them up against the Undivided, and there were a few players who were like, they had been itching all campaign, they wanted to punch chaos. They had a chance to punch chaos, and they're like, this is super important. They might unlock the secrets of God binding. We have to stop them. And I like being the GM, like I couldn't help myself, and I just pinged in the channel like, have you asked them if they're going to be doing this? Because like I knew from looking at their chat, they're like, oh yeah, your cut sucks. Like let him get turned into a spawn. We don't care about that. So the expedition, they had players being like, this is an existential threat. DefCon 5, and the Undivided are just like, yeah, but no diplomacy happened there because it was just like, well, we're good guys and they're bad guys. We're not gonna just ask them what they're doing.
right,
They're gonna lie to us because they're bad guys.
right, right. I mean, that's. I
So
mean,
that was
there's
definitely
there's a
definitely a learning moment.
there's a fun little like moral lesson for reality in that though. Is when you paint someone as the bad guy, you automatically you choose not to, like you won't even talk or interface with them, right? And we see this in society. We see this in I think the current political state. Like when you're the bad guy, you're the enemy. Like I can't, you're just gonna lie to me. We're never gonna see eye to eye. And I think really what you have going on there is a life lesson to be taught to the
Yeah.
world. So animosity, not only is it giving people enjoyment, but it's enriching lives.
Well, and I would absolutely agree with that. And if you want to get into the psychology of it, like animosity is always just in that sort of personal development thing, and maybe that's why it stuck with me, and certainly a part of why I wanted to bring it back.
Also makes you a great storyteller.
Yeah, there's definitely real world lessons. It's like a microcosm for um for real world problems, especially when you start getting into diplomacy.
Hmm.
And I won't get into the weeds on this because it's certainly a touchy subject, but
It's a lot better to zoom out and not explain it all. We're gonna go with that,
yeah.
yeah. But go on.
But the joke I made, it wasn't even really a joke, just a comment, was that some events in Animosity 5 in 20, what would that have been, 2010, like at that time, like what happened between the players, I was like, oh, this is what's so fucked up with the Israel Palestine peace process. Like the context of the game, I just sort of got it. Like, oh,
Hmm.
that this is how people behave in this circumstance.
Yeah,
It was just this wonderful microcosm
yeah.
of a real geopolitical crisis.
Well, see, that's the beauty of like that's why I love quote unquote genre fiction a lot more than standard lit fic, which is a genre fiction. You can at me, lit nerds. Um, no, I that's a deep cut on previous rantcast topics. Um, but there's a when I sit there and I tell you a historical fiction story, or I write a lit fic story about something that's going on right now, like I write The Hurt Locker or whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
some it's there's only but a single layer of suspension of disbelief between the story I'm telling you and reality. You
Yeah.
come into it, and by you I mean the general audience usually approaches it with either like a inherent skepticism or echo chamber. You don't
Yeah.
really get behind. You don't really get behind the veil. You don't really get into the sort of like psyche and the processes of people. Um, if I tell you a story about an orc just beating the crap out of some people, and then like the sort of like weird fallout from that, and you're just like, and you get this sort of evolving weird narrative about diplomacy around it. Like I've said way more about reality that will resonate with people than had I just told you the one-to-one conversion of whatever I'm trying to say about my reality. I mean, I write a lot of poetry, I write a lot of very personal stories, but they're always fantastical or weird because
Yeah.
one, I need to dilute them from myself because my trauma is very real with a lot of the stuff I'm trying to vent in my stories, and it's hard to like kind of relive that in a one-to-one sense. But if I put it through a weird filter, my inner demons aren't real inner demons anymore. It's a literal demon, in a thing. And then how do you fight the literal demon? You punch it in the face, or you find the sweet weapon, or whatever it is. It's
Yeah.
a lot easier to digest myself,
Yeah.
and a lot easier, I think, to deliver that message to the players. But
No, I'd agree with that. And that was, I guess, to come back to the,
the
what
wretch,
you
Nuno says real quick, the wretched were just trying to get you all off their lawn.
yeah, actually, yeah, they were the, uh, I would say it's, oh no, we're really getting into the weeds here. I would say, Lake by Call, which was the campaign setting, like I would say that was their land, except they stole it from the people who had it before, who stole it from the people who had it before. Anyway, there's some depth to the world building we did here. But yeah, they're basically they were there, and then everyone else showed up and had a war in their lawn, and they're just like, um, so that was where they suffered. So something that's um sorry, I'm answering chat in
I'm
chat.
I'm I'm reading chat here
Yeah,
simultaneously too, and I mean, this is why we call our chat gang the show within the show, right?
yeah.
Um,
Um, but where was I
hey,
going
you're
with that?
talking about geopolitics, the layers to your storytelling, the depth, and the world
Yeah,
building.
so something that's very important in our campaign experience is that it is possible to lose, and that invariably creates a lot of tension and a lot of the blowback we did get from players. And there's a lot of depth to what we need to do better next time here. But was players who, like, they had suffered a defeat, and that there was, I think, a lot of feeling like, well, I don't feel we presented it in a way that allowed them to understand, like, well, but why did we just get defeated? But as a core story, that was kind of a tangent, but as a core storytelling element, defeat is possible. Like that's I think at the top of the show we were saying about stakes, like that's the stakes, is that you can lose the war. Um, and the wretched had a really rough turn two, I think, and they decided to go big, and they came up with hashtag drain the lake. So they're like, well, it's a lake, we're gonna drain it, and they punched a bunch of gnaw holes and turbines, and so they use gnaw holes to and this is the kind of storytelling that we encourage. They came up with using gnaw holes to divert the water as it drained to dump it on some local realm gates that the perpetual had taken from them, I think, the previous turn. So basically, they came up with, well, we'll drain the lake and we'll pipe it, we'll dump it onto these realm gates where it will then drain back into the lake and back through the gnaw holes, which will then dump, like the video game Portal, like we'll just endlessly dump water on these.
Yeah,
Um,
They get a turbine in there, they have infinite energy.
Yeah, I think they did have turbines in there. I think there was some Skaven tech that had turbines powering some
Infinite
other.
energy. Like
Yeah,
we've done it, lads.
yeah,
uh,
we've solved the energy crisis. Skaven did anyway, but of course then it blew up. But yeah,
Skaven stories have, but then it blew up. The end.
so but yeah, so that was certainly really creative, but it was born out of like, well, we just got punched in the face, like we're in a really bad spot, so that sort of having things not going well forced one of the most creative things that happened over the course of the campaign.
Well, that's
And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no. I think that's beautiful. I mean, when you're solving, you're forced to solve a puzzle, right? When you have to
Yep.
overcome, um, that's when you get some of the best the best creativity we see from having to think outside the box or having to think your way out of a corner.
So I don't know if Ricky is still in the chat, but so like early in the campaign, a certain um, a certain ogre tyrant um, decided to he decided to there was the city that had to be claimed to stay competitive in the narrative. The pilgrimage, they didn't really try to contest it. They just sent a couple of players to put in a token resistance. Um, but one of the players was like, "Well, I'm gonna try to rig the city with bombs, so when we lose it, like we'll blow it off the top of this cliff." And because this is where the narrative gets balanced with mechanics. There wasn't enough reporting power to really make that work. So Torag Tometer, he tried to bomb the city, it didn't go off. So the next turn there was a diplomatic meeting, and like that this was the explosion heard around the world, because or around the lake, because there was a diplomatic meeting on Torag's boat, which the expedition and the Perpetual sent a bunch of diplomats, like player characters, which they stepped onto this boat, which then exploded. And from there, Ricky was like, "Well, I'm going to use his midnight character. Like, well, the Midnight City. There, like, we're going to use our technology and we're going to make a nuke." So this just escalated turn after turn of like, well, you tried to blow up a city and it failed. You blew up a ship. All right, we're gonna come up with a nuke,
Mm.
um, and just bomb the map. So it creates a funny sort of cascade of like players. A player comes up with an idea, and then other players see like, oh, he did that, and you guys allowed it. Like, let's see what crazy stuff we can come up with. And you just get this sort of runaway effect of players trying to outdo each other.
Well, you mentioned tug of war before too. I think early on how
Yeah,
the players are kind of tugging a war, and like they're just like what they're tugging that rope over is who's got the bigger bomb. Like it's
yeah,
almost, yeah, they're just pulling that back and forth. Like, well, now we get the bomb. No, we get the bomb, and just like pulling it back and
and
forth.
and and that was a huge departure, which actually I have to give credit to Bythier and Warboss Kurgan, because Peter and I were not sold on it originally, but basically Warboss Kurgan came up with like, well, we should do Dread Solstice but better. And that's what this was, because again, the old map based campaign, there was a bunch of clunky supply mechanics and resource mechanics, and you had this map and you're trying to move around the map, and it was just it led to just a lot of like, well, I want to do a cool thing but the game doesn't allow it, so I guess I won't do a cool thing.
Mm. Yeah, you got to
And
say yes, not no to your
yeah,
players.
and I mean that isn't to say a lot of cool things did happen, but mechanically it was very difficult.
Mm.
But then with the narrative path mechanic, where like I said, you got your 6 teams, each of them fight 3 other teams per turn. Like it allows for a lot more just straight up, and like Nuno said, from turn one, that there was no sort of beat around the bush, jockey for position. It's just straight up, you guys are right into it.
Hmm.
And I feel like that to use the Mad Max analogy again, where that you have a car chase in literally the first 60 seconds.
Mad
Um,
Max got it. I remember that came out during the sort of like Gen X action resurgence. Like this is when we were getting like another iteration of Terminator, we were getting another Blade Runner, I think. We were getting
yeah,
all these like sort of Gen X action sort of resurgent films, and it was the one I remember watching that first trailer, and it had cars exploding to opera metal, and then like a couple one-liners, and I'm like, this film gets it.
yeah,
You got to have that like opera metal explosion, kickoff. I think. And we
right,
talked about the sort of importance of conflict. You started with conflict. Stories should start with conflict. Um, and you also
no, I hear it.
imperceptibly landed on another tenet of writing, which is start the scene as late as possible, which is something that Tarantino was lauded for, and like during
Yeah,
Reservoir Dogs, and always starting at the very very last moment. In fact, Tarantino went so far with that he started it after the thing had happened that was important at all, which is the heist of and then it's just the whole fallout of this, and you get all the character interactions, right? The
right,
the heist had already happened in Reservoir Dogs. It had already gone wrong. Whereas Heat builds up all the way to the bank scene.
yeah,
Assembling the crew, and like Reservoir Dogs said, no, we're going to start as late as possible, which is after it's already gone wrong, which is kind of brilliant storytelling. So, and that's kind of what you're doing is you're starting in the heist, right? Like, which is
yeah,
not the Tarantino point, but what
yeah.
most of us would think of as the correct point to start in.
Well,
Is
well, and so I do want to jump in there. So we didn't really get to execute it the way we wanted to this year, but we will have what we call the Warpath, which is a reference to our our roots with the Warpath Forum. Um, which will that's sort of our pregame. So we'll kick that off somewhere between 1 to 3 months. We haven't really set that in stone yet. Before Animosity 3, and that'll sort of be our heat build up. Period of when we start introducing the coalitions and the story. So people can sort of start planning like where they fit in here.
Mhm.
If we're back to tabletop gaming at that point, organizers can start planning their events, and getting their groups involved, that sort of thing. So we will have a build up period, which we weren't really able to do this year. But yeah,
I think it seems to have worked
but
out though. I mean, I've
yeah,
heard tons and tons of buzz about it this year, and I
yeah,
think it
no,
was one of those great
no,
sort of vacations that we all needed from our current
yeah.
state.
No, the amount of feedback that I've gotten and people just being like, basically 2020 is 2020 and that this was, a very welcome break.
Hmm. Yeah,
And that's really been great to hear, and I'm really it means a lot more to me when I can, doing this sort of thing feels meaningful when it's more than just, entertainment, haha, push soldiers, roll dice. If it has that impact beyond the game. And then of course there's all the food that everyone shared. So
beautiful, beautiful. I think that's.
so,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Finish your
no,
point.
no, no.
I think we can
Go.
we can kind of get close to wrapping up here, but I just want to touch on Velatron's comment here.
Right.
So I am curious from a mechanics perspective, how did you account for factions that had less members, or was it that the factions with the most participants had an edge?
So that is a little bit of a gray area. In that what it came down to weight of reports per turn rather than players. So like everyone was afraid of the expedition because they had the most players, but uh, I think the highest reporting power ended up being pilgrimage, just because they had the most active players. But there were so we made the very deliberate decision early on that like there is a curtain that the mechanics stay behind, but
This is important.
yeah, but we don't show all the mechanics because it again past experience with having done this, back through the Warhammer Fantasy days, like we know when you let players look at the math, like they're gonna find something to be even more angry about.
Hmm.
And we don't want it to have to be that way, but that's kind of how it ended up.
Well, and
So
you don't want to nitpick the system really. You just
yeah,
want like the GM essentially should be telling the story and compiling it. And at some point, you got to
Yeah.
be like, the GM's word is law. At some point, you got to have that baked into your system, right?
Yeah. So to answer the question directly, though, I kind of got on a tangent there.
Mm.
The players with the most reporting power per turn would have had an edge. But there were mechanics again that this is Bythier's Excel engine that all the numbers get put into. There were mechanics in place to balance that out, and we now that we got to see this in action with 200 plus on some turns, reports hitting it every single turn, we were able to see how to build it better next year. So that'll be even less consequential. So what we really want is a rock paper scissors system where it's not so much the basically everyone is more or less even, and it is important to me to reward the coalition with really active players. I do want that,
Yes.
but at the same time, you don't want the shorthanded faction to just get stomped, and that will be even more balanced next year. So it really comes down to like where do you put your reports, where do the other, which paths do the other coalitions do, and how that plays out. Um, so I actually need to take a medication.
Well,
Real quick.
yeah, yeah. Go ahead and do what you got to do, and
I was going to ask, would you be interested in pulling? You've been reading him in chat this whole time. Would you be interested in pulling Kai Leonis on the show because he's a much more interesting person than I am?
well, I mean, I was figuring we can move towards rap because I know you kind of, we both had a day ourselves. But if
Fair.
if you want to,
I was just going to offer so I could step away for a minute.
okay. I mean, or we could just both take a real quick break because I need to refill my water anyway.
Fair enough. That works too.
All right.
So
All right, chat. We're gonna do the rare. I'll go ahead and clip this out in the podcast version.
fair.
And for those of you watching this on YouTube, might I suggest watching Mad Max Fury Road real quick?
Yeah. Just if you can find the original trailer that's what that was when I knew it was going to be great. Just
Oh
that
yeah.
very first, I think Comic Con maybe trailer where
Y-
I'm just like, I knew nothing about the old movies, but I'm just like I'm all in on this one.
Yep. Yep. The opera metal. The car explodes and flips
Yeah,
up over, and I'm like, I think they even showed the Doof Warrior with the guitar and the like fire. I'm
yeah,
like, I am a simple, humble man. All I want is heavy metal and explosions and like
right. All
uh,
right, that
yeah,
sounds
yeah.
good.
We'll take a real quick break here. We'll be right back, chat gang.
Chat. I'm going to go back to building these Lumineth. So what I'm discovering here is,
Look at you. You made it back way sooner than me.
yeah,
I like what Quietest Woods said here, that mechanics just facilitate the story and direct player effort into channels. The story was beautiful. Kaleonis. I like that I don't know anything about you, but I know your brand. Like in this short period of time, I feel like I know you. For today, this is the person who will charge the thing.
basically. So I'd messaged him real quick. He is available to jump on if you'd like to get a player perspective on what we just did.
Why the heck not?
Um,
Why the heck not?
I've decided. So when I stepped away, I decided like I'm sick of staring at these Lumineth sprues. So I'm gonna finish these last 3 Dawn Riders tonight, and then we can call it a night. Because I've had these looking, like while I've been working on Animosity, I've had these 2 sprues just sitting there looking at me, and I'm sick of them. So is it okay if I pull him into the?
Yeah, go ahead.
So add friends.
You're doing all the heavy lifting for me here.
There we go. Now, if I press create group DM,
I'll just have to rejoin. There you go.
all right, there we go.
Beautiful. Wunderbar.
I don't know why it kicked.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Excellent. Hello.
So, Mr. Meff, this is Kai Leonis. Kai Leonis, Mr. Meff. Right.
Pleasure to meet you. Thanks for hanging out in chat gang tonight, by the way, Kai.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely.
This is when I say that that chat gang is the show within the show. Money where the mouth is every time, bringing people up from the the chat to be on the show.
pretty much.
Yeah.
So even though I like you were just saying, he needs no introduction. Kai Leonis has been with Animosity campaigns 2 years longer than I have. So I started with Animosity 4, which was set in Cathay. Kai started with the original Animosity 2, which was set in Araby, in 2007. And he has just now, for the second Animosity 2, mostly finished his Bretonnian army.
What character was Kai in this most recent Animosity?
He was a Bretonnian Sacred Protector out of their PDF list. So he is an ethereal apparition of wonderful knightly virtue.
So like a Flesh Eater Court.
You know, everybody who says that to me is going to get a punch. Or not necessarily for the purpose of it, but for the unoriginality.
I know it's like blaming coronavirus on Nurgle. Isn't it's just like it's such low hanging fruit. But you have to understand, I always must be on brand myself, which is to bring it all the way back to Nagash at all times.
Absolutely. But this is what I'll say is that, after coming off, I started Warhammer with 5th edition Bretonnia. So it's a wonderful high Arthurian fantasy. They're good guys. They don't have any real dirt. You go to 6th edition and they got dirt. They're just assholes. Excuse me, I shouldn't say that because we are on the better rules of behavior.
Yeah, you gotta obey the animosity here. Be on brand for them.
But they become the sort of the peasant kicking super noble fluty aristocracy and an oligarchy that's corrupted beyond all proportion. And then my theory is that Games Workshop, realizing their ultimate dream of grimdark, that their final evolution of what could be like 12th edition Bretonia is in fact the Flesh Eater Corps.
I
That it's finally become grimdark enough for them to have knights.
I see. I actually, from a like, I feel for Bretonian players. I truly do. We've actually got one of my friends, who lives in Japan right now, is playing in our Blood Bowl game, and his team name is stuck in sixth edition, and he's playing the Blood Bowl Bretonians. And so I feel for Bretonian players. I get the line. I buy the line from Games Workshop. Fine, it's hard to copyright just knights. Got it. But then make something that's not just knights that reads as them. I and that's where my dark sense of humor comes in now, and it's a me thing. It's not a other thing. I think it's a great thumbing of the nose with what they did with Flesh Eater Courts, but that's because I'm an evil bastard. And I still think that they need to make something classically knightly though going forward. Whether I think that their way into doing that in Age of Sigmar is with Aberash, because at the end times essentially, like Aberash and a bunch of Bretonians like just pieced off through a portal, and we haven't seen them since. So like Aberash supposedly cured vampirism by drinking dragon's blood. Like supposedly Aberash and a bunch of Bretonians have just been partying in like some like Bill and Ted tube, through time and space, and they can just show up at any time with like these like, you know, mesh of like sort of Dragon Knight type Bretonian iconography combined to make like a new Bretonian, and you call them like Knights of Aberash or Knights, or Knights of the Green, or make up some fluffy made up name that I can't. I'm not on the payroll to even pretend to think about. Do that, and then boom, you've got some classic Knights to really scratch that itch for folks. I think that would be a good play, a good move. But through the power of a Neo adventure like Animosity, we get to kind of relive some like classically Bretonian fun, right?
Well, and when we played Animosity 1 last year, when Slanesh was the new hotness, I mean, he showed up with his Bretonians and charged them. So
ABB, always be Brant, or ABC, always be charging. So like I've got a couple acronyms
Yeah.
that both apply here.
I just go back to the classic audacity, audacity, audacity. So the AAA.
So yeah, I mean,
But
yeah, go ahead, Kai.
no, I was just going to say is the PDF list was fun. Obviously you're limited by it, but I think it was more. It speaks a lot to me that having gone through at least 4 editions of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, that just reading the AOS rules, it was so quick and so easy to pick up, and the rule set is so robust that even with just a PDF list, I felt competitive in some of the games. And narratively speaking, I never felt like I was at a disadvantage.
Because you have this sort of third lever, right, when it comes to Animosity. You have that initial lever as a player of playing your game, right? Like that's the kind of first lever. But then you also have these reports. You are allowed to sort of 4 other avenues to sort of stay playing in the narrative of what's going on, and then you have this sort of narrative goal and ambition with your coalition or your group. So you have these multiple levers to pull as a player that aren't just like, hey, the tabletop, that you can really kind of show off some just I don't know, some robustness of play and understanding of the game, the setting, and the system. I think that's really, for me, one of the things that really caught my eye for Animosity. That's what it is. I like when multiple parts of the player experience is heightened and enjoyed. I don't like living in just one sphere of play. I like living in them all.
Agree with that.
Absolutely. And for me as a player going into a lot of these things, like it's not very often you get to do something more than put miniatures on a table and maybe talk to the guy across from you about your army theme. Animosity really lets you explore in a almost RPG deep dive long form way, what your army's all about, what your character is thinking, feeling, and doing as they're going through the motions of ostensibly what is a war game.
Mhm.
At least on the the reality side, as I'll call it. But when you're I'm saying this horribly, but I'll fall back on. I like to think of it as an immersive experience.
It's a RantCast. You're fine.
Tangents, rabbit holes, and taking the long way to the point is highly encouraged here.
Well, the joke was always that it would take me 4 pages to say something that would take Alex like 3 words to surmise. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those
but
days.
for me it was But for me it was always this immersive experience of you're getting to not just explore a world, but you're getting to be very introspective and to say different things about your army and what you can do with your army. Um, like, for example, the Desert Lions, which is ostensibly my Bretonnian force, um, had its roots started in A2. I always thought, hey, this is, I'm cool. I'm doing these awesome things. I'm getting recognition in some of the lore on the turn updates, and I'm having fun. So I'm going to build my whole army around this. And then I played that army in Animosity 3, Animosity 4, Animosity 5, and Animosity 6. So by the time I'm done with like this 6-7 year run, this army has such a wealth of battle honors and history and mostly defeats. But
Yeah.
if I'm going to be honest about it, is the poor lads got slapped around an awful lot, and it was very painful at times. But you come and you get the ability to long form explore your characters, your army, the rise and fall. I mean, how it impacts, and you get to tell this story. And some people do it visually. Some people do it through their conversions and their building. Like, I have it's on my Twitter, but it's sort of my centerpiece model is this very. It took me a long time to convert it, but I felt like for a model with as rich a history as Sir Kai Leonis had, he needed to have something that reflected the epicness that I felt when I took him through this journey of animosity, and that's how that particular model came into being. And I've only now really started finishing painting the rest of his things, because I will be very, very honest when I say that I have a deep and abiding love of Bretonnia. I cannot stand
It didn't show.
painting horses.
You love Bretonnians, but you hate painting horses?
It's a complex problem, and I've tried to rationalize it, but contrast paints are a lifesaver when it comes to painting horses, and that's probably the only reason now why my 1,000-point Bretonnian list I've had for darn near 2 decades is the only reason why it's even nearing completion now. Is because of those things, able to paint the horses.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Man, I had a question in there, but I forgot it.
You have
Yeah.
a notepad there for that, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Shh! Don't tell them. They're not supposed to. I don't prepare for RantCast. That's why it's bad. Like the minute they think I put any preparation and this is the end
Right.
result into the show, the mystique is gone, man.
Yeah, no one needs to know how the sausage is made.
That's right. Yeah, you don't know that I take notes and do research for episodes. I don't do that. It's all off the cuff.
Right.
This is
Fair enough.
No, I usually do. Yeah, I've been taking notes this whole time, and I just I got lost in this sort of story of this Bretonnian player who's kind of like
Yes,
weathered the storm.
That happens when you talk to Kai. I know. I've known him long enough.
No, my question is like essentially like the defeats are kind of mitigated because, and this is starting with the statement, I'll get to the question. The defeats are kind of mitigated a little bit because there's this wider impact. This isn't we're at a match play event. You have the friends you made along the way, and you have your win-loss record. Like that's kind of it. And that's not to downplay that experience. I really thoroughly enjoy no frills, just the game aspect of match play. I really do enjoy that, by the way. I always have my own, sort of loose headcanon that's going on when I'm playing games, but like that's for me. I don't need to share that unless the other opponent, partakes of my craziness. But like with these losses, you from a narrative spin, it might not be that like your Bretonians are just so thoroughly outclassed by the rules, or like got way outplayed on the table. You can almost tell a sort of like Battle of Thermopylae style story where these marauding this sort of like tangential like force that are just kind of like taking their licks, and they're getting their honors where they can, and they're still lasting and around, and that is itself a victory. Do you think the appeal in one of the big appeals that kind of keeps you around is that you get that sort of like the losses are mitigated by the fact that you're telling a grander story?
It, yes and no.
If I could
I'll
jump
call
in there,
Okay.
if anything, the losses are far more painful. That's all I was gonna say.
And Alex and I suffered through perhaps one of the most gut-wrenching defeats of all times in an Animosity game with Animosity 4. And part of it is I call it the high highs and the low lows.
Mm-hmm.
To come into the question directly, and let's charge it down first and trample it under hoof.
ABB.
Yep.
AAA, baby. AAA. When you're in deep in a narrative investment, you're watching all the time, the effort, and you're pouring your heart out writing story, trying to come up with creative ideas, new tactics, special projects. And when you're working with a group of people towards an end, when you end up on the losing side, it really is, you feel it viscerally. And part of that is, you have to be able to step back a couple of paces and say, okay, I charged the hell out of this. Still lost. But you know what? The charge was bleeping worth it. Like I can look back and say that it was not from a lack of effort. It wasn't from a lack of trying. And narratively that comes across as, you're I mean, what's the emotional state of being on the end of a kicking? Is that, okay, what do I do next to come back stronger and try it again? I love the line of, I cannot defeat this knight. I can only kill him. And that's where I kind of strive to come into this point of, you can't defeat me. You can only kill me.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think if anything that actually shaped part of my narrative into it, is here's a guy who has tried desperately to win, to be the good guy, to save the world, to do all these things, and it's blown up an awful lot in his face. So I decided to take that as a direction to follow narratively in the next campaign, where he became a questing knight and was really following the, how do I prove myself worthy again?
A little Don Quixote going on here, actually. We're
Yeah.
charging the windmill as your dragon, right? Like,
absolutely. And it's not so much that the loss is mitigated. If anything, in the narrative environment, the loss can be amplified. But the loss has a deeper meaning to it because the entirety of the story around it. There's the thing is, I go into a tournament and I throw some dice and I get some bad rolls and I lose. I can blame the dice.
No. In RantCast, we never blame the dice. This is part of the get goodening.
I threw away an entire set of dice after I statistically proved it underperformed.
That's fair. It's funny because it's like, I've got that like sort of skeptic's mind, and I worked in like a casino for a while, and so I know that it's just like dice are just odds. Like I know all these things about like luck doesn't exist, and yet I watch it unfold constantly to where it's like even me, my weird analytical brain, where it's like there's just chance and law of averages and so on and so forth. I'm like, I know the d20 I roll in all my RPGs because it rolls better. Like, like I know the gray die. I don't roll it as a GM because it's killed far more player characters than any other die in my collection. So I only use it as a player, and it's affectionately named gray die, even though I don't believe in luck and yada yada yada. So no. You make your own luck by charging, right?
I have had more success when I have basically said, bleep it, I'm going to do what I want. I'm not going to try, anything fancy, go straight at him, hit him in the face with a lance made of steel, and high five him that way. And this is another side tangent I'll slide down here is it's more fun to play in character than it is out of character.
Yes.
So when you start doing, I actually had a bumper sticker made that was "What would Kai do?" and had it on my box for the longest time that I brought all my miniatures to different places with is a reminder that, hey, what would Kai do? And it's just like whatever this character would do always turned out to the best thing I could possibly do. Either the dice were with me, the lady's blessing finally freaking worked, and I seemed to roll an awful lot more sixes when I needed them and an awful lot more ones when I was taking leadership tests.
So I've got the most important question though. How did charging the whale on the mangler fish turn out for you?
For me, it was extraordinary, and it was satisfying in a way I can't explain. I wrote a very fun piece that unfortunately did not make the cut into the final narrative update, but I'm not sad about that because the pieces that did make the cut were amazing. So no sour grapes to that, and but I may have described myself as this sacred protector with ethereal mist blasting off of me, only leaving the verdant green flame as I'm basically dive bombing our Midway style onto this beast with this echoes of my Bretonian past through my mind. And I become the lance, and in one beautiful moment of narrative poetry, I describe it as the ugliest narwhal ever, with me as the horn, going smashing into the head of this beast, and the massive rain, the hailstorm of stone horns falling behind it.
Yeah, so that they use their card drawn player to airdrop stone horns, by the way.
Awesome. It's like that Ray Liotta movie, Operation Dumbo Drop, but with stone horns.
So
with dozens of stone horns, we stole an entire herd, and so there's two stories that requirement at this particular time. Number one, when Alex, right after the Animosity one a year ago, pitched to me the idea that we're going to be going to a lake and we're going to be dealing with the whale, I immediately latched on to, I want to charge the whale. Like, this became my
he's been telling his
focus.
wife for a year that he's going to charge this whale.
See, this actually goes into match play when I talk about making your own narrative. I talked about, like, I don't even remember what I named him, Throck, General's Bane, or whatever. You have this idea. You can go into a match play game and, like, you can obsess over a narrative angle for something you wish to do in the game. This is where I don't believe narrative and match play are mutually exclusive. I kind of despise that.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah,
I do too.
And this is like the personification of that turned up to 11. And I need to comment because, like, some people do listen to RantCast in a pure audio form. Alex had a fantastic air guitar solo in the background while you were describing your charge.
Well, and I want to jump in real quick and say part of our campaign structure is the coalition. So we we do not like we try to take the Grand Alliances and we put them in a blender. So and we don't exclude anyone from joining any coalition. We just discourage weird matchups. But like if you have a strong enough story reason, like cool, do it. So that was how the core of the Soul Munchers, which Kai was a part of, was Destruction plus Idoneth Deepkin, and then Caradron are mercenaries, so they had a Caradron player who was like, hey, I'm gonna go over here, work for these guys, and that's how they ended up. Like, well, we have a Caradron player, so we're gonna airdrop Stonehorns. And having that sort of unconventional mix-up allows for some really, really creative stuff.
Right.
And when I approached choosing a coalition for this campaign, I went from it in normally I would gravitate towards the let's just call it the good guys factions. Kai Leonis being a very idealistic 5th edition Bretonnian knight in archetype form. So very Arthurian, very very whatnot. It's where I tend to be gravitated towards. I probably would have ended up choosing the Pilgrimage, simply because I like the off-brand good. Alex can talk. I was the only Bretonnian player in Animosity 4 to choose the Outcasts. Of course,
which were on brand for their
people
name.
would understand that, but let's just call it them. They were kind of the prototypical Pilgrimage in Touchstone references, but it was sort of I like the idea of roguish elements. You wouldn't think of them as good.
Oh, the King of Thieves from the Sorbo Hercules, Bruce was Bruce Campbell's character. The Thief with the Heart of Gold is like one of my favorite tropes. I love a roguely. Malcolm Reynolds, I think, would be another one that fits into that category. From Firefly, like I love that character archetype. I love the rogue with a heart of gold type.
Yeah, and just like we were talking about the problem with Chaos Undivided, like especially in Animosity 4 back in the day, like the Order of the Dragon Shield was the exact inverse of that. Of like, we are the generic good guys, we do good things, and all the players that gravitated to that. There's an old forum where my signature, if you remember the days when we still had signatures on our internet posts. To this day, it still quotes another player regarding the Order of the Dragon Shield, and the quote sums up their entire campaign, which is, "I refer to it as the poking a beehive while standing on an anthill strategy."
Kicker points out one of the most pivotal rogues with a heart of gold by spelling it Rouge, first of all. Han Solo rogue with a heart of gold. He doesn't start out that way, though, and I think that's important to remember, is that he has a progression. That's his character arc, is essentially going from cutthroat smuggler, only cares about the money sort, to rogue doing the right thing for the right reasons. That's what makes him a compelling character, which is why he needs to shoot Greedo first, otherwise it undermines his entire character arc. Yeah, at me on that one, Star Wars nerds. Or, McClunky. Whatever.
And I'm trying to think of somebody who matches up well to Kai, and I can't quite. I'd have to think about it a little bit harder. But...
Yeah, you're in a category of your own, buddy. Anyway, I don't even remember where we were originally going with that.
I can get us back on track. Oh, well, Kai, go ahead.
I got it.
Yeah.
I was about to explain my entire purpose. I normally would go to one of those good factions, but I chose the Soul Munchers in part because the history of orc factions in previous Animosity campaigns, they were always a lunatic asylum, and they always turned out to somehow be the best good guys, despite there being Empire Bretonnians and Kislev and all the other what you would assume would be fun ones. But my entire purpose for the last year was Charge the Urwhale, and they seemed, as a destruction faction led by one of the figureheads, was a bone splitter Vorgath priest, I think.
Wergog.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex. Yeah. They seem the most likely to want to hit a beast in the face with a lance, so that's why I slid into them. And it turned out to be a perfect fit. We had a lot of fun. Just a big shout out to all the Soul Munchers out there. You guys were incredible. You were creative. You challenged me to write better. And they came up with the idea of, it'd be funny if we dropped a stone horn on like turn 1, and we percolated it and built it, and I latched onto that idea, and we turned it into a collaborative narrative at the end that was amazing. And I got to charge the whale while riding the orca all the way down, and it was just sort of a wonderful culmination event. And they helped make it happen.
I like
So
Quietus Wood saying, "Won't lie, ethereal Bretonian shouting wall was intimidating."
yeah, that's fair.
Fantastic.
And when I say 200 reports a turn, like for the last turn there, like I gave myself 4 days to do the update, and it took 7. And so when Kai says a collaborative project, they handed me a 25-page document, and that was the airdrop in like 6 different phases. So they not only did they airdrop it, they then set the whale on fire.
We went full Hindenburg, burning it, crashing it to the ground.
Did you crash it into somebody though? Because that's what makes it the coolest. Like,
No,
or the like one person who walks out into the field and they see the Urwell coming down, and like someone on top of it like riding it towards the ground, and they like unsheath their katana and stare at the person crashing the Urwell to fight the person who rides it to the ground.
Because oh no,
I should never be allowed into the Animosity campaign. My brain does really.
You would fit right in. I would recommend either the Skaven faction or the Orc faction. You were perfectly crazed for either one of them and be successful.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
But I'd say narratively, when I was writing the final segment, I had a slightly different. Well, we weren't technically in control of where the the Urwale was going, so it was more important that we destroy it. And I figured that Alex would have enough leeway with how I left it that if he wanted to crash it into somebody, he would. So there was a thought in mind to do that, but I did not want to write the end.
Yeah, you got to give your GM a thread to pick up, right?
Yeah, and not only that, when you're doing these kinds of things, and this is a shout out to all the new players. It's like you have to leave the narrative at a point of decision on whether or not you actually succeed or fail. You leave it at that point of decision, and then say, hey, but if it does succeed, this would be really cool if this is the end result we got. Like, I wasn't sure we were actually going to destroy the Urwale and crash it. I wasn't sure if we were going to burn it, so I kind of had these cutout removes in my own narrative, or in the continuing narrative that we collaborated all on. So Alex had points of decision to say, okay, yeah, it doesn't happen this way. So there's a leave the room and don't predestine yourself. So.
Yeah, and just real quick, while they were airdropping on the floating Urwale, it was being dragged off through a realm gate by Rot Kraken. So yeah, there was a lot going on by the end, and that was very deliberate from a GM perspective. Was like each turn I was trying to ratchet it up a little bit more. So what started as a little bit more of a well, you're jockeying for different territories, ends up with this flying whale that's now on fire, and just turning it up to 11 rock guitar solo.
Yeah, I like that the metal is prevalent. So I've got a question for you. From the player perspective is what do you look forward to the most as a player in an Animosity game? You have this sort of tenured relationship with it. What do you look forward to the most? Obviously, we heard your 1 year goal, but you keep coming back every year. What keeps you coming back? What do you look forward to?
It starts with knowing that I'm going to be in a community of extraordinarily creative people that are going to push me to my limits. That's the first thing. I know that I'm going to be at my most creative in this kind of cauldron. Like, there's always the old thing that, conflict and war brings out the most creative and imaginative in human beings, unfortunately. Um, and fortunately, in this particular case, when the conflict actually doesn't hurt people. So I get that, I get my muse, I get inspiration, and I get my desire to actually pull the gray plastic miniatures out and slap some paint on them. I get inspired to go out and find games. You know, that's the first part of it. The second part of it is, you know, a competition against other players and what I will gently describe as an audacity slash shenanigans one-upmanship. It's who can be the most bold, who can be the most daring, who can do the most insane thing, who can write the funniest moment or the best moment or the most heartbreaking moment, or it's just this, let me get into this ring and see how I stand up against that next person. And the thing that I'm always constantly blown away by is just the sheer creative output. I mean, some of the best stories I've read for Warhammer Fantasy Battle came out of these campaigns. It wasn't a Black Library book. It wasn't an official GW release. It wasn't a professional writer one-offing in an army book. It was, somebody's short story talking about how their troll stepped on some poor Empire pikeman and now has spent the next 4 turns trying to get the pike out of his foot while rampaging through an army. It's moments like that that I want to get in there. I want to be a part of it. I want to creatively add to it. And I just want to sort of, sit in the hot spot of that creativity and just let it all out.
Right on.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, you got it.
I was going to say, if I could say something controversial, because like I've been following, I know I keep referencing him, and I'm sorry, but Honest Wargamer, like I've been following the T Sports Arena thing that he's doing.
Yeah, the Super Series. Yeah, he was on the show a couple weeks, I guess a month ago now, doing the Super Series thing.
It is my humble opinion that Animosity is far more competitive than Super Series.
Well, there's the hot take that'll get me all the clicks. So thank you for that. That'll be the cold open. I'm gonna chop that other like 3 minutes of conversation and just like put that at the front.
Right. Like I will, that is a hill I will die on any day. For the reason that Kai just eloquently said.
I'm gonna go ahead and cling to any vestige of journalistic neutrality here and defer to a quote that Haywo said pretty famously, which is the most competitive event he's ever been at was a narrative one in Holy Havoc. Holy Havoc is cutthroat as hell. Like,
all right, Kai, we're going to Chicago.
Yeah.
When you have a reason to fight, it makes the fight that much more important to win. And that's what is at the heart of Animosity campaigns, is like you have massive stakes. At least, I've always felt like the stakes were pretty big. Like, I'm going to go in here and I have to wreck. I have to bring my A game and I have to fight. And if those bastards on the other side have come up with something better than us, then we got to come up again and we got to hit them back harder. And it just becomes this snowball effect. I mean, I call it narrative PvP. Mm-hmm. And, it can be brutal. It can be cutthroat. There are certain times during the campaign where you mention another faction and you just want to tear them apart limb from limb, choke them out. Like there is good old fashioned hate. Like, I went to the Ohio State University, so I will not even refer to that state up north, but it's that kind of spirit that gets into some of these Animosity campaigns as well. So it's when you have a reason to fight and there are stakes on the game.
It's the stakes, man. You gotta have stakes.
A bigger thing happening than just the guy across from you.
Well, I mean, that's something I will
And
say for
and
this. Oh,
when
go ahead.
you are literally writing history. No, I was just going to finish up with when
No, finish
you
up.
are literally writing the history, and you have the chance to leave a legacy. Like, what do you want that legacy to be? And that's what keeps bringing me back. Is one, it's the character arc. Two, it's the competition, and three, it's I've always come out better at the other end for it.
Right on. No, I think that's just what good storytelling does to folk. But I will say regarding stakes that the Super Series, I think one thing that will be doing, just to talk about the Rob thing real quick. I won't weigh in on which is more competitive by any stretch, but I think what the Super Series is attempting to do is give stakes to match play, because there aren't lasting stakes beyond win the trophy at a normal match play event. I mean, maybe if you're on like a two-peat or a three-peat of like, I've always won this tournament, now I need to come back and win the tournament again. There now you have stakes, right? Um, but like what the Super Series is doing is essentially, I mean, the League of Legends, and you got to keep in mind, I used to shoutcast League of Legends. I've been paid money to do this, to do professional broadcast for some esports. I truly do get that aspect of it. But like one thing that I always really harped in my broadcast career, that maybe one day I'll go back to, who knows, was that you need to give a narrative to the audience, to give a crap about your tournament. We think about like the big tent pole, League of Legends. I only use League of Legends as an example because it's the most ubiquitous, it's the most acknowledged. Like caring about World 9 gaming at all. Like, why do you care about the Ohio State? You went there. Why do I care about the Green Bay Packers? I live here. Like, I have, like, when it comes to like esports or T sports or whatever you want to, there's not really a geography easy go to for having stakes in the game, right? There's not one of those easy go tos. You have to develop a reason for me, the audience, to give a crap. Why do I like Manchester United and in Euro soccer or Euro football? Because they had really funny advertising in the '90s. Their whole thing was about how they were like tough guys that beat the crap out of people. And like I just thought their soccer hooligans getting banned from like Italy or something like that during World Cup was the funniest thing I've ever seen. That's why I like Manchester United. I I have a narrative that I clung to for why I like Manchester United.
And so I've
And
kind of been all over the lots, and so I was at a summer camp for railroading, and that's where I lost half my hand, but that's a different story. Anyway, what the people who work at railroad museums say, what they call it is interpretation. Like to your average layperson off the street who just stops by the museum, like this is a chunk of metal, and you have to humanize it. You have to interpret it in a way that they care about.
yeah, I mean this is an advantage that a narrative event has. You go in automatically with that like those I don't say stakes, but you go in automatically with a narrative, with an interpretation, right? One of the great struggles of match play is it doesn't have that. I think that's its great struggle. That's the great struggle Rob faces, is giving it that. That's what the Super Series will live or die based on whether he can form a narrative. And when we talk about narrative, obviously in this context we're talking about like a story in the game of Age of Sigmar. He needs
Yeah.
to build a narrative around the competition itself. If he doesn't, that's where I think we talked about it during that RantCast.
Yeah.
If you care to see a different sort of hat.
Yeah, and I'll check that out. I've been busy.
No, no, no. That was a self. I bad at calls to action. You talk about like you walk away from your tournament knowing things you can do better. Me as a content creator, I've been struggling in isolation. I've had nothing but time to reflect on myself and the stuff I put out there into the world, and going like, I don't do this as good as some other brands do, or I fucking hate the word brand. I don't do this as well as some other stuff does. I don't I don't do this. I don't reset the argument or reset the guest enough. Or not argument, reset the argument. God damn it, I did it twice. Reset the guest or reset the premise nearly enough. So I should have been like, this is a live show. Every half hour, or so, I should be like, and I'm talking with Alex, and like I know what I should be doing, and it's just like, doing it is something I really have to concentrate on doing, which is weaving. One of the things I did really early on with my show is I weaved a narrative between episodes. So like we had the famously Tristan and Bryce had a rivalry back and forth, uh, show to show on who would get the highest like RantCast time. This is stakes, right? This is what we're talking about. This is having stakes in my episode. But then that narrative that I framed it with was like the rivalry, and then eventually they were on the same episode together. And so we had this like essentially 6 episode Rantcast arc where they disliked each other and then they came on the same episode together. And I used to do a lot more of that, and I'm like, I need to go back to my roots on that, the original sort of proof of premise things that I really wanted to do with it with my own show. And it's interesting because I'm self-reflecting on that, and yeah, I'm sorry, I had to justify it, so.
No, that was certainly. No, that was interesting.
Oh, I love WWE. Like I am a the magical Mr. Mephisto is a persona. I'm a WWE heel on the internet. I have to be so that I can play people competitively. Because if I play good guy armies like you, Kai, I can't get into the mindset to win. Because like it's like I can't do renegade playthroughs in Mass Effect because I don't understand why like you just be a douchebag. I'm like,
see, I loved the Renegade playthrough. That was my favorite.
Yeah. Renegade FemShep is some of the best writing in the series, by far.
I don't know if Kai's still on the call. He says he has thunderstorms there.
And Kicker, thank you so much for gifting that sub to Velatron.
Yeah, thank you, man.
So Kai, you still there, bud?
Test 1. Test.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
1.
Yep. I need to check something real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay. I'm sorry. You're cut. You're a little scrambled right now. Sound a little bit like a robot. Try again. Nope. So we talked about stakes. We talked about it a lot. This is a question for both I want the GM perspective. I want the player perspective. How do you raise the stakes going forward? Animosity 3.
Ooh, that's toughy.
You don't have to be specific. You don't give away any of the heat. Remember, we hate telling people how the sausage is made.
Right. So I think this next campaign is going to be a little reactive in that we're going to take like what interested players this time and kind of double down on it.
Mm-hmm.
So something players really dove into, and it created a lot of animosity, was diplomacy. So this next time around, like whereas diplomacy wasn't actually designed into this campaign at all, like I think I want to create an environment where each coalition is really going to have to sort of do that poker bluff thing where they're going to have to talk to the other coalitions, and they're going to have to decide do we really trust these guys to keep their word.
So you know what, we've had a show within a show going on here, spawned from when like, hey, like I don't know if I should go play an Animosity, my little devil's advocate blurb. I might be too extreme or too weird. Nah, you'd fit right in was the response. But then we got talking about like my Ossiarch Bone Reapers narrative essentially hinges on a character named X. And so if you know anything about OBR lore, they're like a bunch of souls blended into like a vessel, and they're selected and chosen, and yada yada yada. So X is essentially the Liege Cavalos who, fighting during a necroquake with like a corn, like with a bloodthirster. He's supported because he's a cavalry guy. He's fighting a bloodthirster, and like he's got these 12 souls of like the greatest battlefield tacticians and swordsmen and so on and so forth. The 10th personality dislodges itself and becomes a dominant personality. So rather than like 12 souls working in concert, It's a single soul with 11 other voices in his head.
That's gotta suck.
And so his whole thing is like he's got to keep up the kayfabe that he is still an obedient Ossiarch Bone Reaper out to collect the tithe for Nagash and Katakros. Um, but like he remembers being a living, proud, like literal freaking knight. You know, like not quite heroic enough to be chosen to be a Stormcast, but like pretty good to be a Liege Cavalos in Nagash's own mockery of the Stormcast, right?
He was a unit leader in a unit of Knights of the Realm.
Yeah, or like he was a great sworder, like he was the unit leader of the great sworder, and like he survived several battles and deployments and did some pretty metal shit, and he had a family and stuff. Like so he remembers all of that. That's so the whole. I'm following the advice from actually Chuck Moore is like I struggle personally to tell a narrative for an army, and maybe I can get some insight from both of you on this. Is like how do you tell a narrative from a singular perspective and then zoom back out to the army and then zoom back in? How do you sort of rubber band like that? This is something I struggle with. I tend to tell a lot of first person narratives when I write stories, or third person narratives, but I prefer the camera on the shoulder third person.
Right.
Um,
So I
so
mean,
so yeah, so like the whole thing with this character is that like the Mortisans are essentially the diplomats and the Liege Cavalos are the field tacticians. And so they
yeah,
usually travel with a Mortisan who's there to perform diplomacy, and the villain in X's story is actually the soul or the soul mace or the soul yeah, this like the soul mason or whatever deployed with him to do the diplomacy side of things, because if he ever finds out that that X has sort of dislodged himself and is the dominant personality, he'll immediately reblend his soul, or
right.
like put his soul into a freaking horse, which is like the greatest punishment that the Bone Reapers have if you fail. So
No, that's actually a really, so one, yeah, you'd fit right in, and two, that's actually a really
and so when you said
really cool narrative.
yeah, when you mentioned the diplomacy thing, I'm like, so like my villain, because I would be playing a villain army, but with this
Yeah.
personal story of heroism, who's this is that personal aspect. Is like I feel like my insomnia makes me pretty flighty. My some of my personal struggles with my traumas and stuff like have me very like I'm a little Tyler Durden, to put it
Fair.
simply. Um, like so this is a personal story about some of my own struggles with my own inner voices and this sort of like depression and anxiety and all these things I struggle with internally, and it's like having those multiple voices are essentially like me fighting off all that stuff I'm always fighting myself, yet the power that it gives me, so it's a very personal story from when I'm writing about X, but then when I zoom out to my army, I feel like, how do you as a GM kind of embrace that, like, okay, the army does this, but then I have this main character sort of character player that everyone's playing with. um, how does Animosity handle that?
So as a player in Animosity, I don't know, man. I I, I completely understand what you're getting at, because I certainly certainly dealt with that too, and that my player character became kind of the army, and it got really bad by the end, because the last big campaign in Warhammer Fantasy was Animosity 6, and the GMs had this mechanic, and I'm not answering your question here, but the GMs had this mechanic where like you had an agent that you could send off to do stuff for you, and then while you led your army. And I kind of ended up inverting it, where my player character was the agent going off and doing side quests, and then the my army was just the NPC sort of just chipping in battle reports. So I'd agree that I struggle with that too. I think when I have done a better job of balancing it, um, so like the narrative that I'm actually doing right now, for one of the armies that's going to show up in my tale of one warlord times four, is a flesh eater court army called the Court of the Pale Saint, and the Pale Saint himself was my old player character, and he lost so many games that the last time I played him, I was just like, you know what? No, he's dead. He's been killed so many times now. This time it's permanent. And I'm dividing the army up among his children, so the pale siblings. Um, so it's there's going to be 5 different.
This is
Five,
that the Pale Saint that chat was popping off about.
yes, that one. So
Okay.
his spawn are going to feature with my flesh eater court. They control it now, but in their case, in their case, like it's 5 different baby ghoul kings, and each of them thinks in their own head they should be the king. And the only way they can hold the military might together, because if they each go off and form their own warband, they're going to split the court up. So they're still trying to keep the military power of having an entire court. They're sharing, but they all hate each other, but they all have to work together. And kind of the thing I want to explore there is like the different what are they called, the characters in the Flesh Eater Court army that are below like the Ghoul King and the Vargulf.
Uh,
Charge targets.
Yes, charge. Courtiers, maybe. Is that what I'm looking for?
courtiers, yeah, courtiers, yeah.
Yeah, how the courtiers and their own units that they're kind of attached to, like where their loyalties end up shifting around between the different siblings. So I've kind of tried to introduce this much more complex narrative that goes down through the strata of the army. And I think making a relationship between your main player character and the other officers in the army, like if you go back to I don't know if you've ever read them, but the Hornblower books by C.S. Forrester, like it's 11 books about Horatio Hornblower, but as he progresses through different commands, like you get to know the officers underneath him all the way down to the occasional deckhand who becomes a character, and that I think that kind of helps flesh out the rest of the army around the stand-in for yourself. If that
Right.
makes sense.
Right, yeah, and I mean the goal here is that like I get to be the quote unquote bad guy as an army because heels have more fun, but then I still have this personal story because I am not personally a bad guy. Anything I do when I write about an evil character is an inversion of self or a worst case scenario or taking something that I fear and turning into a villain, right? Uh, making it a personification of something that I dislike or hate or fear. But it's all just filters on the self, right? Like that's all any story ever is.
Well, and so I'm gonna fess up to a misstep I made, and I got called out on it, rightly so. Where I wrote a figurehead who's supposed to be, so for the wretched, we named the figureheads. We had a Bray shaman named the Oracle of Peace, who was supposed to be incredibly warlike, and then we had a plague priest named the Oracle of Humility, who was very vainglorious. And I wrote humility. Like I felt bad afterward because I was having fun because I was writing him as a complete pompous prick, and then the players read that and like took actual offense at it. Like, oh, you're calling me an idiot, and I'm like, no, the character, this character is calling your character dumb.
Yeah.
But like that's not how they interpreted it, and I'm like, oh fuck, I fucked that up.
Yeah, I mean that's just part of the challenges of being a storyteller, really. Like, especially when you're in that 3D that back and forth, that dialogue of story, right?
Yeah, like I wasn't trying to be an asshole, but I realized afterward, like, oh, that's completely. It read as me, the person, being an asshole to other people. I didn't intend that at all.
You just need one extra filter, then. That's my advice. That's the writer advice. So you got to ham it up even more. Is all I'm saying. Is like make it like use even more ludicrous insults to where like the hyperbole is apparent. That's my lean in even harder. That's the that's the trick.
Or just let the faction kill him for being a pompous prick, and the problem is solved another way.
But didn't they get to kill him? Like that was
yeah. They did kill him in the end.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. So like here's the thing: is like, would you have felt as great killing him? If he wasn't a pompous prick to begin with, like the reward of that's why do we have tension and conflict? for tension release and conflict resolution. That's why we do that in the story. And sometimes you can have a really good reward of like the sort of non-reward, right? The anti-humor or the anti-whatever. It really depends on the type of story you're telling. Kai, I kind of asked a question while you were kind of in and out there getting your mic um, under control. The big question was like, how do you balance the specific character point of view in a narrative like this, but then zoom back out to an army and then like have your army sort of view that you also have to execute. It does a big army just become an extension of the singular character, or is there some play there between the two?
It, mm, and the reason why I'm going and
RantCast
Alex
asks the hard questions.
and Alex knows the hilarity on this is that during one of the campaigns I literally had my army stripped away from me because of the narrative, which created its own unique challenge, but also an opportunity. But I would say it really depends on what the character is. Like for Kai Leonis, the Bretonnian knight leading an errantry force shortly after Nemesis Crown, going after Araby. He's a young guy, first command. His family's entrusted him with this small force. The army served as his training montage genesis. So the interaction with the army helped was integral to his beginning character development and his story arc. So there was an awful lot of interplay, maybe not necessarily because I was still in a kind of a proto writing thing in my first narrative campaign essentially. But in my head canon, in my mind at least, there was his father had sent the old grizzled veteran to be his standard bearer to make sure he didn't get in too much trouble. So there was a lot of mentorship and interaction. So whenever I did something stupid, I could blame it on Kai, and then I could have my 2020 hind vision come in the form of the standard bearer come over to inform him of the mistake. And then, did Kai learn it? Did I learn moving forward with my own hobby and my own games as a result of it?
Right.
Different armies and different even different personalities of character probably have a very different interaction. And I think it's more about who is your person, what is he doing in the moment, is the army important? For Kai it was important because he's surrounded by a group of knights. This is all that is known to him in a very foreign and strange land that he's never been in before. So this is his circle of trust. This is his comfort level. This is what's helping him get through this new experience. And, it was a very big shock to the character and a very interesting time for me when we got to a campaign where he took his veteran knights, the last, the hardened guys that have been with him through thick and thin, into a major battle, and he lost every single one of his men to Skaven warp fire cannons. They walked right into an ambush and literally got blasted. And the way that Kai survived was all of his knights dogpiled on him to protect him from the warp fire. And then I spent 2 campaigns going through the emotional trauma of this guy who's always had his army around him as the center of his personality, his center of, he need only look at his, his veteran knights beside him to know that, yeah, I'm going to charge the hell out of this and you guys are going to ride with me and we're all going to be fine because we're together and we're going to punch this thing in the face. And now he's alone. And now he has to face the world alone, and it terrified the hell out of him, and so I went through the arc of, both the positive and then the vacuum as a result of the loss of the army. So for me, the character and the army was always, in one way, it was part of a singular whole, is that I'm looking at the army as how it helped my character, and then what the loss of that army meant to the character in the afterwards.
Well, that's a great story arc. That's a good character development piece right there, actually. Like, just brilliant.
Accidental most of the way through.
Well, most great stories kind of write themselves. When you say they write themselves, it's because you do your legwork on having a good, interesting character and a great backstory and a good world, and then you just expose them to it. And this is how I write literal, like, this is how I write my novel, this is how I write the short stories I write, is I think up all of that other stuff and then I just expose them to it. And there's like a point in time where the characters start making their own decisions, even as in a singular fashion. I am the singular writer writing my stuff. What Animosity kind of does is it kind of forces that organic decision making, that you don't have to like work really, really hard as a writer to disarm your own sort of inner cynic while you're writing. It's so that's the hardest. That's one of the hardest features of writing. But I think that's a good kind of point to wrap on, is like the sort of balance and the joy of playing, this main character, right, in this world, and then you play some games of Warhammer, and you show some models on the internet, and you sculpt this narrative kind of collectively and competitively against other folks. Any closing thoughts there, Alex? Any? Did you get them all off the sprue? Did we get
Yeah,
it done?
they're
All,
the last three
the
are
last three? Perfect. Perfect.
that's why I turned out the light.
Yeah,
'Cause, yeah,
it was good visual cue.
working
So good timing. Yeah. Any last points, soapbox moments, wrapping thoughts?
Yeah, so I think I just want to close on what Kai was saying there with the arc of his character. And just on that real quick, like, players are welcome to bring the same character back over and over, or we had some players who each campaign they tried something completely new, and got a different experience. And both are welcome, and both are certainly valid. But to kind of close on what you were both just saying, um, what you just said is absolutely true. That animosity forces circumstances on your character that you don't have control over, and you have to write how you adapt to them. You don't have that sort of meta control over what happens, and at least for me, that creates a much more interesting level of storytelling. Even with your own characters, and like you just heard Kai's story, and like for me as a player, my player character started out as basically a sort of good guy dwarf, your sort of generic dwarf thane, and then going through war after war shaped him into a really interesting character that I love to this day. But that wouldn't have happened without the blast furnace of being exposed to dozens of other players and their stories.
Mm-hmm.
I really struggle with even when you go to the court of the pale saint, like, my flesh eater court army was literally like, it's 2016 and I want a second army, so if my brother comes to visit, we can run two armies into each other, and I got a deal on some used models. Like, that was 100% of my flesh eater court aspirations. And then I ran them into Peter's Stormcast, which were made out of Reaper miniatures, but that's a different story anyway. So we played an entire Firestorm campaign in 2 days, and over the course of a weekend, and because that's all the time he had to come down to visit, and that conflict became the genesis of a story that we've kept kind of playing off each other when we can see each other once or twice a year. And now I've got a bunch of pilgrimage players who used the death of my player character because I just got fed up that he'd lost so many times. I'm like, cool, he's dead this time, you killed him, congrats. And the pilgrimage all hung on to that and used it as an excuse to start a whole nother war.
The
So,
you martyred him unintentionally.
yeah, like you drew first blood, and like it's a complete falsehood, but it gave them a good reason to start a war. So
See, that's awesome.
but
Yeah, go on.
and I think that clash of player stories having to interact with each other creates a really brilliant and organic storytelling experience.
Right on, right on. Kyle, I'll let you get a closing thought before I bounce back and have Alex do the great info dump, put everything on blast he needs to put on blast. Kai, any last thoughts about Animosity as a tenured player?
I made the choice to bring the same character back, and part of it was I was always at the end of a campaign when I thought I'd finally reached an arc that I could be satisfied with. I found out there was always more I wanted to explore. Something new happened that I needed to bring him back to finish out this story. I needed to do this next thing. And, you know, when you're put into the collaborative cauldron that is Animosity, you do surrender a level of agency in what can happen to you.
Gorgeous
But at the
models.
same, yes, the Lumineth cavalry, if they weren't horses, I'd be more enticed towards them.
You would like the cavalry better if they weren't cavalry? Got it.
It, it's a weird dichotomy in my Bretonian mind right now, but we live with our contradictions as much as anything.
Right.
But you exist in this place where you're exposed to things that you never would have thought of. And I found a true joy in, oh my God, this just happened to me. How does Kai react? Oh my God, we just lost a major point. We just got imminently thrashed. What can I do here? And the other sub part of that is, I came in with some of the silliest possible ideas as the core genesis for something that became a very serious and concerted creative effort. I want to charge an whale turned into, almost a love song to Bretonia, uh, in the world that is from the world that was, with this ethereal knight, just doing weirdness, and then realizing that he's free to be destructive now. He doesn't have to be beholden to anything anymore.
Hmm.
Um, my own my own writing in that regard.
Oh.
But it's the expectation of what happens is never what actually ends up happening. And it's wonderful, and it's vexing, and it's frustrating, and it's amazing, and it's high highs and low lows. And if you can ride the trough, you're going to have fun surfing it.
Right on. Comp Killa, hashtag charge everything. That's right. ABC, always be charging. All right, so folks want to get invested in the Animosity campaign. What's the best way to kind of stay woke to it? As mentioned, Animosity 3 will be next year, summer sometime, right? Like,
So make sure to bookmark animositycampaigns.com, spelled just the way it sounds. Um, on the homepage, there will be a Twitter feed. If you're on Twitter, go ahead and follow us at. I had to condense campaigns, but it's just again at Animosity Campaigns with a little bit of a funky spelling on campaigns. That's probably the best way to follow us is either our homepage or just on Twitter. And as we get closer to the next the Warpath, we'll be pushing out updates more frequently.
right on, right on. And you just closed up one. You had some player rewards and all that stuff. So there's pretty
Yeah.
active feed right now if you want to kind of retrospectively go back and just kind of scroll through and see some of the hijinks, quite frankly.
Yeah, if you look up on Twitter, if you look up hashtag animosity2, and that's two Roman numerals, so animosity um, yeah, you'll see a ton of great hobby and a lot of there's a lot of screenshots out of the Discord that are just hijinks that happened. If you would like to join the community directly, um, on our website, again, animositycampaigns.com, you will see a community tab that has an invite link to our Discord, and it's it's really just an amazing group of players. Like considering animosity is something that languished, in a Facebook chat between me and Peter for years. Seeing it come back and be reborn in this way, and seeing the energy and the friendships, I couldn't ask for a better team of people to back me up, or a better base of players. Like everyone, there's been basically no drama. There's been no real bad blood. Like everyone has been amazing
Right on,
for the last 2 months, and I really couldn't ask for better.
right on.
It's just a really great community. So if you want to be a part of that, check us out on Discord. And as came up a little bit earlier in the show, if you want to follow my hobby adventures personally, um, uh, there's a blog post on the Animosity homepage that has the different social media platforms I'll be on. But if you just want to find me on Twitter, it'll be at Little Soldier TV. Because the Little Soldier was taken, so I just put TV behind everything.
No.
That wasn't taken.
Mephisto FM is my Instagram, which I never advertise because Mephisto was taken, and so was Mr. Meth, and like all the iterations I usually go to, and I'm like, fuck
yeah.
it. Freaking Zoomers on Instagram, like just flip table.
Yeah, I hear that. So yeah, just follow Twitter, just at Little Soldier TV, and I'll be dropping a lot more updates for what I'm doing through there and where else you can find me.
Right on.
Yeah.
Any idea when we get the first big content drop from you?
Yeah, so I mean the teaser image is out now. If you read the end of our last unfolding narrative, there will be some hints that line up with the picture. If you can place them, we buried that in there. The next big content drop will not be, I want to say, not until February next
Well,
year.
you got to hibernate for a little bit after this.
Yeah, definitely. But we've already planned. Like what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a breakdown. We already started the autopsy debrief. We're gonna, while it's fresh in our minds, we're gonna learn as much as we can now, and then we're gonna put it on ice through the holidays, and then January we'll pick up a new dev cycle.
Right on.
And that's the plan. So there won't be anything new in that, regarding Animosity 3 until probably around February is the first you'll start seeing stuff. But that said, there's been a lot of demand for it, and it's something I want to do. So we will be dropping sometime. I don't want to put a date on it, but sometime in like the next month-ish, we'll be doing what we call a player's guide to Amazia and Lake Baikal. And that'll just kind of bring everyone up to speed on like the settings of the two campaigns we've had, like where everything stands right now. So if you want to base your army in it, if you want to run soulbound adventures in the setting, like just pretty much like snapshot in time, this is where everything stands after the two wars that just happened.
Metal.
And just kind of set everything up to go into the next one.
Right on. Well, Kai, you want to do a quick sign off? Put anything on blast yourself?
I am generally boring and uninteresting. I do have a singular Twitter at Kai Leonis. I don't really have much going on outside of the Animosity campaigns.
That's just fine. The impromptu coming off the bench here to help us was a lot of fun.
I really appreciate it, Kai. Thank you.
Yeah, getting that player perspective and proving that Chat Gang is truly the show within the show. All right. Well, thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
I was just anytime.
Right on.
And yeah, thank you for having us on and taking the time to talk to us about this.
Yeah, Alex said this was awesome. This is one of those things kind of born to Twitter, like, hey, like we should talk on the show that I have weekly. And so I'm happy you had another successful campaign. I mean, just from my like sort of layman outsider perspective, it looked stunning. I got excited on. I caught that residual heat where I'm just like, oh my god, this is pretty awesome. So I'm happy that you came on and kind of talked to me about it. I look forward to next year. And I can't commit to anything in my life, but we'll see about if X is indeed going to give it to you in Animosity 3, which is my own personal character. So thank you so much. Chat Gang, again, you're the show within the show. You're the reason we do this thing. Remember to drink your milk, pay your taxes, and we'll see you next week. Good night, everybody.